Okay, welcome everybody. For the people coming in, I see now everybody is joining us. My name is Ari Rosenbaum, um, and welcome to that 401k virtual conference. This is a new thing for me, um, I welcome all of you as I see everybody joining in. So about 5 weeks ago, we were at Walt Disney World for that 401k National Conference. I think it was 5 weeks ago. It feels more like 5 years ago with everything that's going on in the world. So we were the last conference that was being held prior to, as taking a line from the movie The Poseidon Adventure, where the entire world turned upside down. And of course, now we have, I think, the first national virtual conference. So what we're going to do here today is we're going to take that virtual, that live in conference experience and try to bring it to you virtually. Unfortunately, as a friend of mine, Jeff Todd, pointed out, there will be no lunch as there's usual for our events. There will be no stadium tour. Most importantly, there's no athlete appearance. Goose Gossage, who was with us at Walt Disney World, will not be here today. But outside of that, the beauty of it is you can watch this conference in the confines of your own home, in the confines of you not wearing any pants if you so choose. So, you got to look at the bright side of things. I wanted to share the screen for a moment just to go over the agenda. And of course, I don't have the agenda in front of me, so please bear in mind that this is a work in progress, as this is the first time I'm doing a live Zoom event. So anyway, the agenda is I will start it off, talk about coronavirus concerns for plan sponsors and plan providers. Lyle from Granite Group is going to talk about MEPs and PEPs. We'll have a few breaks in there. Pension assurance, we'll talk about some common audit findings. Then James Holland from Millennium will talk about ERISA being a team sport. We'll take another break. Mark Copen and Jeff Linkowski from FPS Trust will talk about one of the greatest things out there, their automatic rollover solution and what's going on there in the business. Ron Stairs from Creative Plan Design, what's a 401k conference without talking to a great TPA? And so Ron's going to do that for us. And then Paycor, talking about payroll, which of course is a big deal, these days. So without further ado, let me see how to, I don't want to do my new share. Okay, so now see, does everybody see my screen? Does everybody see the conference? Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we have a lot of the attendees showing up, which is great. So let me talk about coronavirus concerns for 401k plan sponsors and plan providers. Just really my 2 cents about what's going on there in the world, some observations. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the CARES Act. Also, keep in mind that the Q&A, if you see the Q&A button, feel free to have a question and answer. If you have a question about the presentation as is, at the end of the presentation, each individual presenter will be, asked questions where they can provide answers if you have any concerns or issues or just questions about, the presentation that you see. So first things first, coronavirus concerns for 401k plan sponsors and plan providers. Number one thing, what plan sponsors should do, like a line from the movie in Airplane 2, don't panic. Of course, people panic. Obviously, I've been in this business for 22 years. I've seen a whole host of problems going back to the dot-bomb era, the mortgage, housing market blowing up. So this is nothing new. This may be new in the sense that we've never seen such unemployment, maybe since the Great Depression. We'll see how it goes, But these are really what plan sponsors should consider. They need to think long-term. What can they afford in terms of employees and contributions? Of course, they should talk to their financial advisor, talk to their TPA, which, of course, is the audience here today. It's important that they don't handle things on their own, especially when they can't. Plan sponsor concerns, of course, despite the CARES Act change, there's still a fiduciary rule that they have to play no matter what. They have to provide employee notices, deposit salary deferrals as soon as possible. Of course, what to do with employees against, versus their money concerns. Do they furlough or they terminate? If you furlough an employee, they're not considered a terminated employee. They can't have immediate access to their money, retire money, except, of course, for hardships, the coronavirus distribution, which we'll talk about. But obviously, there are issues when you have so many employee terminations. You may have a partial termination of your plan, which would require the employer to fully vest those terminated employees' contributions and account balances and whatnot. Severance pay, just keep in mind that could be concern. Severance pay can be considered as regular comp if it's paid within the within the year, and it's for money that a plan participant. So anybody, if you not listening, if you could mute, I'm sorry, if you are listening and not speaking, just mute your. Somebody was complaining that they could hear back of somebody's computer audio, the speakers. So anyway, severance pay as planned compensation is regular compensation as long as it would have been paid to the employee before the severance from employment occurred. So if somebody's getting paid severance pay where they're giving them 2 weeks for every year they were there, so if they were there 20 years, they got 40 weeks of compensation, that would not be considered severance pay for purposes of planned purposes because it's not payment an employee would ordinarily received, and most importantly, it wasn't received before 2.5 months after the date of termination. And why do we care about that? The reason that we care about it is twofold. One, if it's a 401k plan, the employees are entitled to get an employer contribution on that money, as well as any other plan. And then especially in a 401k plan, these employees were entitled to a salary deferral of the severance payment. And of course, if you didn't give them the contributions, there may be corrective contributions that have to be made. And of course, plan sponsor concerns more so. Terminating the 401k plan, you may see a lot of employers want to do that. If they desire to still be in business, if they think there's still hope, terminating a 401k plan will invoke the successor plan rule, which would ban a 401k plan from starting up from that same employer for 12 months. And then most importantly, you got employers that are suffering, talk to them about employer contributions, safe harbor match, safe harbor profit sharing. If they put in a notice and 30-day notice and they put in an amendment, they could avoid that contribution. Of course, they would subject the plan to testing. If the plan has a stated match, an amendment, and SMM for the notice. SMM is effectively a notice of a plan amendment to an amendment to the SPD. If you have clients with DB plans, money purchase plans, target benefit plans, and cash balance plans, I'm sure half of those plans you don't know what they are anymore because they kind of changed after 2002. But anyway, all those plans are plans that require minimum funding. Therefore, they have to amend to cease accruals of contributions or accruals of benefit. Should be done before the latest of June the 1st to avoid any 2020 contributions. And the reason is when employees get 1,000 hours, they've accrued the benefit for the year. So we like to do it before June 1. I actually like to do it sometime in May. 2 or 4-ish notice, you may have a 15-day or 45-day notice. So if you have employers that want to terminate, cease a contribution, now is the time to do it. Plan provider concerns, turd in the punch bowl. That's a joke from the Disney event where I told my buddies on the Retireaholics that I am not a pessimist. I'm just the turd in the punch bowl. I kind of tell people how I feel. People get irked by that. But the fact of the matter is that in this business, some retirement plan providers will go out of business during this pandemic / financial crisis. That's a fact of life. We see that with any business today. They closed up shop. They couldn't deal with what's going on there. They're going to go out of business. It's sad, but unfortunately it's true. The most important thing, make sure that it's not you. Keep things in perspective. Keep things in perspective. This isn't the end of the world where, again, I got to cite the Poseidon Adventure. There will be a morning after. You got to take care of your most important asset. Obviously, it's your employees. I always talk about the story of Ralph, my mechanic. What you see here, this little office here, Hurricane Sandy hit, and there was pretty much water up until the ceiling. Ralph, my mechanic, on the other side of Oceanside, 17 feet above sea level. He didn't have any water. But unfortunately, he had no electricity for 2 weeks, and half of his clients had to get new cars. That negatively impacted his business. Ralph decided to go take his personal savings, fund his business, keep his employees and staff, and now, 8 years later, he's doing better than he was 8 years ago before the hurricane. Good experienced retirement plan professionals are hard to come by. Just keep that in mind. I remember that being a former TPA attorney. Markets will be choppy. We don't know how long. Obviously, the market has been doing well last couple of weeks. We'll see how it goes once those Q2 numbers come in. And of course, that's an issue when you're being paid on plan assets. You shelter in place. You can't be a hermit. And I really believe that every challenge is an opportunity. Right this week, I signed up a brand new multiple employer plan for a client. They wanted to set one up. And it happens. And, there's a lot of competition out there. They're ignoring their clients. And you got to market in times like this because, other people aren't doing it as well. And of course, as you know, I'm here, give me a call. So let's talk about the CARES Act for a bit. Talk about the provisions. Number one, distributions free from the early distribution penalty. If a person is an affected participant, they would be able to get $100,000 outside of the hardship distribution. This is completely different. Up to $100,000, they could avoid the early distribution penalty under 72T. They'll still have to pay income tax, but it won't attach any distribution from 1/1 to 12/31 when it deals with coronavirus. And an affected participant is somebody who has coronavirus or has a spouse or dependent who has coronavirus. Or somebody who experienced an adverse financial consequence as a result of being quarantined, furloughed, laid off. Basically, anybody whose pay at work was affected by coronavirus, they will be able to get a distribution if the employer allows it. And again, there are some employers, I have a MEP that I serve as a 316 administrator on. One adopting employer didn't want to offer it for their employees. And unfortunately, we're going to let that adopting employer opt out, even though I think, in my opinion, most employers are better off by opting in. Most importantly, for this early distribution penalty, plan administrator just has to rely on the certification of the employee. That's different from regular hardship, where regular hardship, a person says, you know what, I want $100,000 because of medical expenses. Ordinarily in hardship, they have to show you their medical expenses to see if they qualify. Here, a participant says, you know what, I'm an affected participant. I'm certifying it. And the plan sponsor can just rely on that. If the participant is lying and they get audited on their personal income taxes, that's on them. That's not a breach of fiduciary duty. So feel free to tell your plan sponsor clients that they can rely on that certification. The tax can be spread pro rata. And for some strange reason, they gave the individual the opportunity to return that money back into the plan. I don't know how many participants are going to do that, but they have 3 years to pay it back if they want to. And of course, the CARES Act also expands access to plan loans. Usually we have a $50,000 or 50% limit. Now we're going to have $100,000 or 100%. And more importantly, for the participants that already have an outstanding loan, they could, under this provision, delay loan repayments for a year, which pushes back the repayment period, which is fine, even though we usually have a 5-year repayment period for a loan. And then, of course, they're going to have to make up the interest lost for that year of deferral. Of course, the loan after that year is up, the interest is accrued and adjusted, and the period is extended. And again, this is something a plan sponsor has the opportunity to opt out. My opinion, my 2 cents, I hate these provisions because they're going to expand leakage of plan assets out of the plan. And a lot of plan providers, including yours truly, at times when I'm a plan administrator, you get paid on plan assets. But most importantly, the market went south. Plan participants are losing out even if they, their account balances went down by 20%. However, you have to have empathy for people. It's their money. If they need their money, allow them to have access to it. RMDs under the CARES Act, required minimum distribution requirement, are waived for distributions that should have been made in 2020. When I first read the law, I thought it only meant 70.5 and 72 people who are just taking out their first distribution. Actually, it's all RMDs except for some reason defined benefit plans, and maybe they'll change that and correct that. If they took out their 2020 RMD before the CARES Act came into place, IRS just released guidance, I believe in the last week or so, to allow for a rollover of the RMD back in. Last two changes under the CARES Act, relief for pension plans and for plan amendments. If you have a client who had to put in a minimum contribution for, again, a pension plan, and it's a 2019 contribution, ordinarily their due date is their tax return due date, which includes any extensions. This provision now allows them to make up that 2019 contribution and pay it January 1st, 2021. So they get, depending on their status, probably 3 to 9 months of deferral. They'll have to make up the accrued interest, but that doesn't change any requirements for 2020. So again, if you have a plan sponsor can't afford and has a tough time coming up with the 2019 contribution, talk to them about their 2020 contribution for these pension plans, defined benefit plans, money purchase plans, cash balance. Plans don't have to be amended for this coronavirus CARES Act provisions until the last day of the first plan year commencing on or after January 1, 2022. So no amendments have to be made. That's great. But that's also a reason why the TPAs have been reaching out to the plan sponsors, whether they want to opt in or opt out, because obviously if somebody's opting out, they don't have to have amendment in place. But if they opted out and then wanted to opt, it's just basically they want to conform practice with the CARES Act by opting in or opting out with the plan amendment that's going to come down the pike in about 2 years. And of course, you know who I am. You've contacted me. You get an email from me about twice a week now. So, again, please feel free to reach out. And let me go to some Q&As. Somebody asked, didn't the CARES Act provide relief to DB plan sponsors so they could delay funding until next year? Yes, for 2019 contributions, not for 2020. Partial plan termination rules. Can you address it? I have not heard anyone talking about this, and if clients may be going down this path without realizing this, will this rule still apply in these circumstances? Is there any talk about it? There is no change. The partial plan term rules is a facts and circumstances rules. They say that if 20% of your employees have been let go, the presumption is that there will be a partial plan termination, which means the affected plan participants will be fully vested, including all their employer contributions. There is no relief from this. Again, it's facts and circumstances. So, for example, for any business that operates in the summer, if they terminated all their employees after the summer ended, the inference is that was the normal, ordinary course of business. They terminate, it's seasonal. It's not going to be a partial term. Next question, could it be argued the CARES Act withdrawal provision is actually more favorable than the loan provision? For example, if a participant defaults on that 5-year $100,000 loan in 2021 or later, they will be subject to taxes penalty, whereas in the withdrawal, that won't happen. Yes. Yes, the withdrawal is probably a better bet than the loan because you have to repay the loan. But, again, somebody taking out the loan comes out with the best of intentions, and then they assume that, that they could repay it back and then realize later that they bit off before they bit off more than they could chew. So that's that. I mean, for mostly people, they have it, Somebody said the reason they put in repayment option, the same reason you don't like loan. If you can utilize, yes, it's a great, it's a great option. Just like I said, if you have that, please, again, somebody had the best idea. I like to repay it. Remember, it's a participant direct investment. Okay, for the loan suspension, is it a year from when the participant self-certifies? For example, yes. It's really from the self-certified, when loan repayments stop. And you could use the certification as that 1 year in order to do that. But if you're going to ask a Q&A, just hit the Q&A button rather than the chat button. But I did see that. Severance pay does not count on earning. Okay. Post-severance pay does count if paid within 2.5 months of severance pay or by the last day of planning. Yes, as long as it's pay that ordinarily would have been paid to the participant if they were still working there. So, for example, vacation pay would still be considered part of severance pay. But if there is severance pay that has no connection to an employee still working there, for example, like I used the example, if you got 10 weeks for every week that you worked there, that was your severance pay, then you couldn't do that. Then it would not work out. So those are the questions that I got. And one more question and then we'll go to Lyle's. Does loan suspension only apply to COVID-related eligibility, or can that be added to current loan provisions? Again, it's related to COVID related eligibility. So if somebody has been perfectly healthy and they're part of that country where there was no shutdown, they wouldn't be able to get that $100,000 loans. So it's COVID related. It's added to the loan provision effectively by an amendment, but it is only going to apply to COVID. The repayment of CARES Act withdrawal can be repaid to any qualified plan, I believe that's the case. It can be paid back to any retirement plan of that employer. SEPs and Simples, they're not qualified plans. They are IRA products. A simple 401k, these rules would apply to, but SEPs and Simples, the RMD situation would apply, but in terms of some of the relief, it would not. Obviously, SEPs, if I recall, SEP IRAs, there are no loan provisions, there are no distributions, and again, their rules are kind of more applicable to IRA products. So that's part of my presentation. And hold on one second. Again, this is I just want to get Lyle's presentation running. So Lyle, our next presentation is Lyle Himbaugh from the Granite Group, which is a 338 advisory firm in Connecticut. I've known Lyle for longer, not longer than I care, but long enough that I don't want to remember that, where I used to work, where I first met him. I think that's more applicable to that. So Lyle, we're going to share the screen.
Don't age us, Hari.
Oh, I got you. Don't age us. FPS's trusts first, and let me get Granite Group.
I could talk to FPS if you like.
Yeah, you can give their, you've seen their thing. Lyle's been to.
I use them.
Yeah, almost all of my events. Does everybody see the screen?
No.
You don't see the screen?
No.
It'd be nice if I put it up. Okay,
Yep.
now see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, and then, okay.
And
You'll tell me when.
Okay. Go ahead and click. Okay, let's get right into it. Just hope everyone's keeping safe and sound. This too shall end eventually. It's a cliche, but just want to make, keep it safe, keep it down low. They're going to open this economy within the next month or two. It's going to be a slow process, but just be careful. And once they do that, I would still recommend using gloves and Clorox bleach and whatever. I'm just going to go over a few things. This won't take too long. Just going to go over the current landscape, NEPs and PEPs, and what we're doing. I'm not going to belabor what Ari does, but you really, with the Secure Act and CARES Act, if you really want some clarity, really talk to Ari. Just remember with the Secure Act, when you have a new plan out there, that they get a $5,000 credit, so it really becomes a non-event financially for them. And with the CARES Act, just know that that people can take out the loans without the penalty that Ari said. And the one thing I do want to say is that when we come out, as we come out of the crisis here, and we're still not over the hump yet, we're getting there. But I will tell you, my vision is that our clients, right, your clients, are going to want more services because they're going to spend more time focusing on rebuilding their businesses than the retirement plan. So you really need to get out in front. So next slide, Ari. So it's just important out there. There's next slide, Ari. So you skipped one, I think. There, no, go back. Hit the back arrow. There you go. Okay, there you go. So some things, these are just some things that we've been doing, and I just want to make sure that, as you're out there, the first and foremost, you really need to be out in front of your clients. Most advisors are not calling their 401k clients, they're calling their private clients. I can't tell you how many times I'm hearing this. And because of that, we were already offered a plan that we've already, sent our agreements to help out an advisor, and we're going forward with a new plan because the advisor picked up the phone and called a prospect. So really here, you really need to understand what the roles are, make sure the employer knows what's going on, whether you're a 321 or a 316 or whatever it is. Get out there, make sure that the employees really understand, you get in front of them and really reach out to the HR people. The HR people are overwhelmed, and it's just a touch point. You just want to be proactive and get out in front of it. Do not stick your head in the sand. They are looking for help on what to do, especially with the CARES Act. And always just do the right thing. We've been doing this for quite a while. We've never used a fund with a sub-tier 12B1 fee. So we just, that we feel that if you get paid by the fund, you represent the fund and not the client. And just be knowledgeable about the Secures Act and CARES Act, and don't give an answer unless you really know the answer. Get Ari involved or get myself involved, and be out there. So go right ahead. So we're going to talk about, next slide, Ari. We're going to talk about MEPs and PAPs. Keep going. So the future, what I believe is going to be the future for at least smaller companies are going to be MEPs and PAPs, right? So, and I'm just going to give you just a quick overview between the difference. There's two types of MEPs. There's a closed MEP and an open MEP. A closed MEP is related employees. So it could be it could be the Dentist Association or whomever, and they're all dentists, right? Or chambers of commerce, right? Those are another one. So if you know the president of the Chamber of Commerce or board members, I would definitely be calling them up because it's a service that they can offer to their member employers. An open MEP is just unrelated, right? So just out there. So the difference between those, that the open MEPs really need to have their own audits in 5500s. Then the Secure Act came along and said, hey, we're going to do this PEP for 2021. And it really makes it nice and simple for employers. There's one 5500, and then it eliminates something called the bad apple rule. And for those of you who don't know what that is, in the old days, if one of the employers didn't do their payroll, something screwed up, it affected the whole plan. Well, that's now eliminated, and I really believe either the MEP or the PEP are going to be the solutions out there going forward. Next slide, please. So employers are going to, and by doing this, because everyone's under a little bit of a crunch here, it's going to save people money, and that's really the point, money and time. Keep going, Ari. And they're going to be here to stay. So, and I will tell you, my vision is that a lot of the big companies out there are going to do these MEPs and PEPs, and they're going to really put pressure on the advisors and dictate what the advisors are going to do. So I would really be out in front of your clients. I'm going to show you a solution that we have a little bit later, but, just be aware of what's going on out there. Go ahead. Keep going. I'm just going to give you, in this section, I'm just going to give you a little, for those who don't know at this point, some of the things to look for. When you're prospecting, just look to see if there's a fiduciary and what kind of fiduciary. The 321 is getting permission from the plan sponsor. 338 is doing it for them. And my vision, as I said earlier, that everyone's going to want a 338 down the road because employers are just not going to be involved. Keep going. Next slide. Yep. So, there's one back. Then there's the IPS. The IPS is basically a policies and procedure. Go back one, Ari. It's just a policies and procedure. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, I would say about 40% of plans still don't have an IPS, and they really don't have it. And in that IPS, they don't document the investment process. That's really, open things up, and especially on the target date funds. I believe there's going to be a lot of lawsuits coming on target date funds now. There's always more lawsuits in a downturn, and you really need to have a process on how you found that one particular target date fund family. Next slide, Ari. Another thing to look for is just index funds. If you see a plan that has a bunch of index funds, it's probably not in the best interest of the employee. And an example here is just the Emerging Markets Index Fund. It's from probably the top index fund family that starts with a V, and you can see how the index fund has done over the years versus the index. It's really hard as a fiduciary to prove that. And if you have questions on all that, you really should, give us a call, and we can help you out with that. Next slide, Ari. Another problem that you really should look for is duplication, right? So when there's 2 or 3 growth funds, because you do not want an employee picking the 2-3 large cap growth funds, or in this case, if you picked smaller mid value this year, and they had 2 or 3 small mid value funds in there, and they picked all 3 thinking they're diversified. They've been absolutely eviscerated. So what we do is to make sure that there's just one fund per asset class, in case the employee does their own allocation. And again, if you need help deciphering and coming up with some proof to land the client, we're totally available. What we do also is that, I also think that I'm not a big believer in target date funds, but I think that, as people want them, just have the process documented. We offer managed models to make it simple for people to get more of a personalized allocation than instead of buying a product, and it's more of a customized approach. Next slide, Ari. And so I'm just going to give you a couple things here. And I'm going to show you some communication devices that really not only initiate conversation, but really engage the employer or the employee. We're a 338. We partner with 316s, either on individual plans or on our MAP. It's a much safer place. And just remember what I said, these smaller companies that don't have HR people, they are going to look for a one-stop solution. And so I'm going to show you something a little bit later on that. But keep going, Ari. So, Ari, just go ahead and click on the, bring up the site. So what we did is, in this proved invaluable over the last 2 months, is that years ago we created an investment education site. Record keepers do a great job of doing a retirement education, but where people really need help on is like where to choose what to do. And we created an investment education site that Ari will bring up here eventually. And in this site, it has a quiz. It has the ability. I'm sorry?
Now?
Yeah, go ahead. Just go ahead and type in the passwords.
Didn't I know what it is already?
Yeah, you should.
Guest.
Just put in guest. Type in that one for now. Okay, I was going to give you another one, but that's all right. Okay, so I just go ahead and launch that questionnaire. So just imagine if you're an advisor, right? And this has been valuable. So we used to have maybe about 100 people a month clicking on the site. I think in the last 2 months we had 3,000 clicks on our site, and this is just for clients only or advisor clients. We create a site just specifically that's password protected for the plan. right? So they all have their individual code. And right where it says GGA retirement at the top, we can either put the advisor's logo or the plan logo, whatever the advisor wants to do. But Ari just took this quiz. You got the conservative balanced. So either they know if they do their own allocation, it's 40% stocks and 60% bonds, or they can just go click on whoever the record keeper is. It already will know who the record keeper is. We're record keeper agnostic. They can just go in and buy the, if it's Fidelity or, Principal or Empower or whomever, it doesn't matter who it is. It will know who the record keeper is. The employee logs in, buys the model, logs off, and we just delivered a personal allocation solution without employing other providers that charge 40 or 50 basis points for that service. This is just a part of our thing. The other thing that we did that, if you look under categories and you hit special announcements or quarterly commentaries or blogs, we've probably posted more in the last 2 months than we did all in the last couple years. Here's a one with March 24th, solutions, what should people be doing now? This proved to be extremely popular. We even had one from December where we told people that if they're retired, we thought the markets were a little high. We're actual managers. We're not selling product. We're actually advising clients on what to do with their funds, and we do that through the advisor. So there's lots of stuff that we put up there. Ari wants to go back to the site. That's the blog. And then, if you hit special announcements, we just put up,
okay,
just click that. So you hit around March 16th, current market thoughts, what we're thinking as the markets were sliding, we're telling people. So it's important to engage. And so we're doing this on behalf of the advisor and it gets pushed out, right? So it will engage the advisor with their clients, with the employer, with the employees, and we do it for them. And then what's happened here is that, it really spawned us to do webinars. We did something like over 20-something webinars in the last month with clients, with advisors and their clients, or with the employees, not this plan sponsor, but with the employees, to give them some color of what's really going on and what they should be doing. And we had tons of success doing that. Or you can hit that select language, and so if someone has a specific language, they can pick whatever they want up there. It's pretty good. And if there's not a language there, we can put it up. So, and that's what I wanted to show you guys. It's in times of stress, this has proven to be just the best vehicle that we know of. That when we produce all this stuff, this is not third-partied out. We produce all these in all those different categories. We produced all this stuff, and we've gotten nothing but excellent feedback. There are some people that were going to settle right at the bottom, and we really convinced people not to. But go ahead, Ari. Let's go back to the presentation. And so that was it really is a good way to get out in front. So when we post something there, we send it to the advisor. The advisor can push it out to the employees, the employer, and really create and engage that client. And the client's going to feel like they're really being looked after. And I can't tell you, we're going to win business for advisors right now. So, and we're actually in the process of getting several plans on board with advisors right now because we've been sending stuff out to them. So just hit the next thing. So this is my only really sales thing is that we have a GGA map, right? And the map is really just it's a one-stop solution. We're the 338, the 316. The advisor is an integral part of the process. They can pick whatever fee they want to charge for their services. It is absolutely bare bones, less expensive. Everyone's focused on fees, and most importantly, above everything else, it's employee-centric. So everything, wherever that fiduciary rule is going to be in the future, and there is going to be a new one coming out, what will never change, in my opinion, is that it's always going to be about the employee first, not the employer. So this was completely structured and designed to protect the employer and to help the employee and to help the advisor win new business and really take a lot of burden off the employer and off the advisor. And we take that, and we really do a lot of communication with the advisors. So next slide. And I'm just going to give you a quick example of what that looks like. So this was a $3.5 million plan that we won recently. Between the advisor and the admin and all the other stuff, they were charging about 1.1%. And with us, our fees came out to 36 basis points without the advisor. But we added in the site that you just saw, the allocations. We added on as a 338. The advisor was not a 338, and we won the plan from him, and we really cut the fees in half. And the advisor was able to put in a much larger fee than we're charging because we're wholesaling our fee to the advisor, and won the business and really increased the service and lowered the fees and really have much better investments in the plan. Next slide. So we're ultimately a partner. We exclusively go through the advisor. We don't really go directly to the employer. If the advisor wants us to partner with or have a call with a client, it has to be done through the advisor. We're happy to do it. Most 338s that sell services won't do it. We're happy to support the advisor in their endeavor, and we're completely accountable and committed to everything. We have the same investments that the clients have in our own 401k. So last thing. Next slide. And here's some of these things. I saw this. I get a bunch of emails from almost every vendor on the planet, and I sort of paraphrase a lot of these things. And this is your time to go out and get new business. Before the coronavirus, 37% of employers are actively seeking to move their plan. What do you think they're doing now with advisors not calling? I'm sure that's well over 50%. This is an absolute time. We're happy to do virtual meetings and do anything with the advisor to support them. Send out emails and stuff like that. There's a couple emails where you can send out that I have, and if you want any help, just call me after this, where you send out an email for a virtual meeting and say, with all the coronavirus, would a good time next week? Would you like to be up to date on this or learn how to communicate effectively with employees? And these advisors are getting traction. Majority of plans haven't analyzed their plan in 3 years, and right now everyone's getting their third quarter statements, and they're probably not too happy, even though the market's come back up this month a little bit. So the best practices, if you really want to get into this and win new business, just go out and get the 408B2 and get a copy of the fund lineup. Those are the first things. The 408B2 is just a disclosure document on fees. Sometimes they have the fund lineups in there, sometimes they don't. It depends on what the record keeper is doing. Get a copy of and if you need and find out, have a conversation. Don't have a presentation. Have a conversation. Just be a human being to another human being and just talk to them. What are they looking to accomplish? What do they need? And let us help you do it. Send us the 408B2, send us the fund lineup, and get us involved. Let us help you. This advisor down in Tampa is setting us up right now with a 3,000 person company. And because he reached out, and this a very large 338 is not calling on that client. So we have a very high probability of winning some business for the advisor. I wanted to make this as quick as possible. I wanted to give you guys give you some color on what's happening in the markets. I wanted to give you some ideas of what to do. I think it's very important to get a list. If you need a list of employers in your area, I give you some ideas, some emails, that you can customize to go out and get appointments, and we'd be happy to join you on the appointments. So. And that's it. Are there any questions?
Actually, yes. Well, there's still a couple left over from before. Someone asked if the Padres jersey behind me, which I think if you see right now, that is a Winfield Padres jersey. So I just wanted to answer that. Terminated participant allowed to receive a CRD, no withdrawal penalty. Again, if they were terminated as a result of coronavirus, if they are within the protected class, in my mind, class because I took constitutional law one time about 25 years ago. But yes, if they're a effective participant, they would be able to take out a CRD. Someone asked if Open MEPS is trademarked. I don't know if anybody did that. If they did, I think they wasted their money.
That's interesting. I don't know.
Will slides be available to attendees? Email me or email the individual person whose presentation you want. Here are questions for Lyle. Do you see MEPS, PEPs emerging as a solution to cover gig and economy workers, such as freelancers and retirement plan?
I'm sorry, Artie, you broke up there a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, do you see MEPS and PEPs as emerging as a solution to cover gig economy workers, such as freelancers? Do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone wants simplicity. You know, they want, you know, people really want things taken care of for them. That's the way you just look at life. People just want things done for them. I think it's really the future.
Okay.
So it's like for individual IRAs, you know, one of your presenters is FPS. So we're on the, you know, Graham Cooper does automatic default out to FPS, and we have some, you know, higher than average plan balances with FPS, and we run money there on force outs or rollovers over there for the advisors as well. Out there as well. So that's they just want things done. Our models are there as well. Mm-hmm. Any other questions, Ari?
Yeah. Do you work with Wells Fargo advisors?
I haven't, but I could. It's just I don't think there would be any encumbrances at all.
Okay. Why would you be opposed to TDFs?
Well, you know, it's not that I'm opposed to TDS from an operational standpoint. I think they're like the way I look at target date funds is that, you know, if, you know, I've done studies and I've written articles on this. When you look at target date funds from an investment perspective through that lens, and you look at, you know, I did a study in you know, over the last 7, 8 years, and if you look at a 2035 to a 2065 target date fund, the return schemes for all those different target date fund years are essentially the same because they're 100% equities. It's only to the last 10 years or so where they start moving them into bonds and stuff. There's really no added value. So think about it this way: should a 25-year-old and a 50-year-old be in the same, have the same return scheme? Also, should a 50-year-old CEO and a 50-year-old mid-level manager have two different, you know, economic outcomes? Should they be in the same investments? It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I've known when I've looked at these target date funds that are essentially, you know, on the longer dated ones where they're essentially 100% equities, they don't do as well as the market. I mean, I think, and for a lot of those reasons, I just don't think they're the best solution. It's not like it's bad, but it's just like I think there's a much better way to do it and provide a much higher level of service. They just don't make sense to me.
Why haven't you seen that much demand for 338s among the mega plans, the $500 million and up sponsors? Do you see that changing in the future?
No, that's a good question. You know, I think with the mega plans, you know, I think they have their own investment committees and they have their own committees, and they're very well staffed and funded. Do I think they should have a 338 who can, instead of, you know, being like, we're consultants, so we have some very large pension plans and we have some stuff out there, but they look at us as a fiduciary. I sign on as a 338 fiduciary, but I'm making presentations to them, and everyone has, you know, one of the bigger plans, they have so many more resources than a small plan. I believe that they should. I think every plan should have a documented process that a fiduciary can stand behind. You know, what we do is that we provide analytics to support what we say in the IPS and how we do on how we on our investment process. But the analytics come every quarter. Then we have quarterly reviews. So we document and improve what we say in the IPS. So we really put the plan sponsor in a really offensive position instead of a defensive position. I think that's a great question. I do think they should have 338s, regardless if they have committees or not. So,
what is the weighted average cost of your investment lineup?
The weighted average cost is probably about 45 to 50 bips because, and the reason why is there are, you know, we do have some index funds like on the larger cap side, but on certain sectors like emerging markets and fixed income and small cap and those really inefficient markets, you're much better off with an active manager. They do much better. They take less risk. So, the way we work, we only find managers that have less volatility without giving up the benchmark return over a long period of time. So when you buy an index fund, you take on market risk and get market return, right? So in those inefficient sectors, in those emerging market stuff, it is much better to have active managers. So that's why our average cost might be slightly higher, but the returns are so much better, and the risk is much less as well. That was an excellent question.
What record keepers do you work with?
All of them. I think the only one I can't work with is probably a couple of the big insurance guys like New York Life. There's nobody I can't work with.
Okay. Somebody more with an observation more than anything else, but they asked if COVID-19 epidemic is a 2020 prospect bust to the small businesses. His small business clients are looking solely at survival now. 401k is an optional benefit and when saving their business, and however many employees, they become their sole focus. So getting anyone to entertain switching or considering a new plan appears to be a pie in the sky. They just don't have time to focus on options. That appears to be the reality for the next several months, if not through the rest of 2020. Eventually, it's going to pass, but not in the near future. Marketing now is still important, just pointing out that securing new clients may be a longer process than ever. I mean, absolutely. I've done it, 22 years in the business. In the years 2000, 2001, nobody wanted to talk about, switching or starting a new 401k plan. It kills them.
Yeah, but Ari, I agree to a certain point, but I would tell the advisors you got to be reaching out. If you're not reaching out, someone else is going to be reaching out. So I'm not going to say that
people haven't reached out to their to the clients.
Yeah, I mean, they got to reach out. If you're not reaching out, you're not understanding their concerns, so you're not going to be able to meet their needs. It's just that simple. So, and when you talk to somebody, I'm not talking. When I say talk, I'm not like how I talk with our children, right? Where we're texting, they define that as talking. That's not my definition of talk. Talking is picking up the actual phone, dialing, pushing some buttons, and actually hearing the inflection in their tone of their voice, so you can understand if they're under stress and what you need to do to help them out. So, I think that the person who ever said that comment, I think, they're not focused right now. But if you have a system that you can just keep, just drip on it a little bit, then, when they come out of it, you can say, hey, they can, in a couple months, things are going to look very different here in a few months, right? So we have lots of resources in this country. We're still the greatest country on earth. We have a lot of resources. We're going to come back faster than, international or emerging markets. I can promise you that. We're going to be ahead of the curve. So I think, as an advisor, you need to be ahead of the curve as well. So I'm just saying, you just drip on, hey, let's, because and the person's right. They're not going to be focused on their phone case. They're furloughing people. They're doing stuff, right? So get in there and help them, right? And say, and then if something happens, it comes up in the conversation because you're talking to them to say, I really need a better solution. I don't want to be doing this. That's when. So here's Grant Group. Here's the feather in your quill. Let's go out. I've got a solution for you. That's how this works.
Just one more question and just a recommendation. The recommendation, somebody reviewed the 408B2 for a plan. The advisor fees weren't listed. They asked for a quarterly participant statement and saw the advisor's fees on that statement. Divided the numbers and saw the advisor was charging 50 bips. Some of the record-keeping systems only show the information on the 408B2 that is keyed in by the advisor. If the advisor does not know to key in, the 408B2 might be grossly incorrect. They recommend asking for a quarterly participant statement. The client can block out the home address. And then,
no, go ahead. What's the question?
Yeah, so if you want to add comments, because we just want to get to a break soon. But yeah.
Yeah. So I think, listen, not all 408B2s are equal, right? So it's usually the record keeper's providing them. So the record keeper represents the record keeper, nobody else, right? So they're going to put down what their fund fees are, what they charge for record keeping. Some do put the advisor fee in, some don't. I mean, it's a conversation with the employer, or you can call up if you're allowed to, call up the record keeper and figure it out. But And wouldn't really, and the person's right, I wouldn't rely 100% on that. So that's why you want to get the fund lineups and do everything out there and just have a conversation with that plan sponsor. There's always a way to skin a cat, right? Always.
Last question: how many companies and billions of assets in the PEP?
In our PEP, it's relatively new. We have about we just opened this up, so it's about 10 plans, but I think we'll have closer to about 50 to 70 by the end of the year. And these are going to be relatively small plans, right? These are going to be in the $2 to $10 million range. 30, 40, 50 employees. That's what was the design of this for. Anything over 100. Listen, I also believe that not everyone should be in a MEP or a PEP. It just depends on the situation, right? So even if you have a small plan that might be very complicated, I wouldn't put it into a MEP or PEP. It should be a standalone plan. Just like some larger plans could go into a MEP or a PEP because it's simple, right? It just depends.
Okay. So thank you, Lyle. We're going to take a 5-minute break and be back at here in the Eastern time. It's going to be noonish with John Russin from Pension Assurance. So like I said, age 40 years old, when I hit 40, those restroom breaks, you got to take advantage of them. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thanks. Well, it's noon here, and if you've been to any of my events, You know that I run a very strict rule. I like to, when I tell people it's going to end at 3, I like to end at 3. Actually, I like to end it around, before 3. So just want to bring here John Russin from Pension Assurance, and he's going to give us a great presentation. To me, plan auditing is one of the, I want to say one of the things that plan sponsors and their advisors ignore. They always go for the cheapest auditor. And I've seen so many mistakes not caught on a plan audit that should have been caught. Sometimes from, I think, John, is it Big Four now? It used to be Big Five. Was it Big Four now?
Yeah, it's Big Four. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forget. Arthur Andersen, I think it was Big Five. When I was in school, I think it was Big Six. I don't know. And then the mergers, and then Arthur Andersen were kaput. But anyway, it was a Big Four auditor, a name you would know, and they just goofed on an audit for 20 years and did pick up a very common error dealing with plan compensation issues. So, John, we're going to put up your presentation. One of these days, I'm going to get the slide feature done correctly, but it's just that I gotta feel my way around, as I say.
I can, okay, I was gonna say I can share my screen as well, but there you go, you got it.
Now I just have to, where's my slideshow view? No, I'm gonna get it eventually, don't worry. New slide, no. It's because the tool thing is from like blocking my way to do it. Okay, here we are. So John, take it away.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ari, for putting this together, and thank you for not starting it at 8 a.m. on Eastern time. I'm out here in California, so today we're going to talk about common audit findings. I just want to talk about the audit. I want to answer questions. I'll sprinkle in some COVID-19 related issues that we're seeing in the marketplace, but I want to give everybody a better understanding for plan audits. Not everybody works with large plans. A lot of people want to work with large plans, so this is beneficial whether you're working with them now or your intention is to work with large plans. So this is all part of that conversation when you're talking to a large plan sponsor. So next slide. So quick introduction. I think Ari already mentioned it. This year we're going to audit somewhere close to 600 plans. So we have a pretty large practice. We're exclusively focused in this area, so we don't do any other service other than retirement audits, plan audits. Next slide. I've got quite a few slides. I'm going to move through some of these pretty quick just to get to the main topics because we've got a short window here. So let me talk about this. I get a lot of questions about this, and I think it's a good place to talk about what triggers the audit. In the general sense, most people understand, hey, it's over 100 participants, it's a large plan, it's the 5,500 changes, it goes from 3 pages to 12 to 15 pages with all the additional disclosure. One additional disclosure is the Schedule H, which is what really drives the audit for the most part. So the participant count is the question I get a lot. So, what is participant count? When is that measurement date? So it's the first day of the plan year. And the participant count is technically 100 participants will cause the audit. There's an 81-20 rule I'll talk about in a second, but let me talk about the participants, the definition of the participants. So it's anybody who's actively participating in the plan, obviously. It's anybody who's eligible to participate in the plan, even if they do not actively participate. So that throws people off a little bit. We have audits where they've got 20 active participants, but they've got 200 employees that are eligible. So that catches some people by surprise. What also catches people by surprise is terminated employees that leave account balances. That gets picked up in the count as well. So, people get dragged in and they get caught by surprise because two of those, the eligibles and the terms with account balances. So it's a good opportunity to get in front of that with your clients that are growing. Maybe if they've got some turnover, a lot of small balances, plan provisions will typically allow you to force anybody out. Typically it's $5,000 or less. So it's a good opportunity to get in there and do some coaching and help them avoid being a large plan when they really shouldn't be a large plan and they just haven't done cleanup on their participant census for a while. Let's talk about the 81-20 rule. So if it's a brand new plan, doesn't have a beginning balance, 100 is the number. So once you hit 100, you're a large plan. So any new plans put into place, and so we have CalSavers here in California, which is it's just driving a lot of new plans. It's thousands of companies. To my surprise, and I don't know why this still surprises me, but there's thousands of companies here in California that have over 100 employees that do not have plans. And I think just in Southern California alone, it was over 3,000. Quick note on CalSavers, as of yesterday, they actually postponed. It was a June 30th deadline for the employers over 100. That got pushed back to 90 days till September 30th. So that mandate is not effective until September 30th. But by then, all companies with over 100 employees either need to adopt CalSavers or start up their own 401k plan. So those companies will instantly go into an audit, ones that are starting up a 401k. Now, if they're existing clients, and this is what we run into most of the time, they don't actually trigger the audit. They get like a 20 participant cushion. So 121 and higher for the participant count is what will trigger the audit. So they kind of, they get that cushion. So that's a good opportunity, again, to get in front of these clients and make sure, you can kind of manage that growth and manage that participant count before they get to the 120. Once they hit 121 and above, then they're in the audit. They're in it till they drop under 100. Ignore the 80. Nobody would follow it down, and it says you can file the same way you filed your previous years if you're between 80 and 120. But once you drop under 100, there's really no reason to stay as a large plan. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what gets audited? So it's a financial statement audit. We're auditing the financial statements. There's a compliance piece to it because we gotta, kind of make sure it's following with ERISA and IRS guidance and obviously plan provisions and things like that. But at the end of the day, our audit is an opinion of the financial statements. So that's mainly what gets audited. There's participant level work as well. We'll go next slide. Limited scope. This causes a lot of confusion, even among auditors, but what's supposed to be audited. The limited scope is when the assets are held at a qualified institution, bank, insurance company, trust company, basically an institution that has federal or state oversight and regulation. They allow those organizations to issue a certification letter. Yeah, we call it the complete and accurate certification. And that allows auditors to not have to go in and recalculate a bunch of valuations for mutual funds or the earnings on those mutual funds. So it saves us some kind of internal control documentation around those transactions as well. So it's really just the valuation of the investments and the earnings on those investments. Everything else still gets audited. Any participant initiated transactions, any employer initiated transactions, those will need to be audited. But that's what the limited scope audit is. Well over 90% of audits will be limited scope. So, if assets aren't being held at a qualified institution, then that becomes a full scope audit. And those can be a little bit messier just because they're not on a kind of a standardized platform typically. All right, next slide. Planning for completing the audit. So just kind of going through the audit. And service providers actually can help out quite a bit based off their involvement in the plan, but providing some documents. I mean, obviously record keepers have great auditor access these days where auditors can just log in and pull 80 to 90% of all the reports we need directly from the record keepers. And then, advisors come in maybe when it comes to kind of plan governance, committee, investment policy statements, or committee minutes is usually a big one. And then obviously TPAs, if it's unbundled, we're getting 5500s and non-discrimination tests and things like that. So go next slide. Audit timeline for us, and I can't speak because it's across the board. I mean, I know some people complain about their audit taking 3 to 4 months. For us, we try to stick to about a 6-week timeline, and that's a reasonable timeline for any auditor that's kind of staying focused on the audit. The actual test work, field work is a day or less, and obviously this year it's going to be all done remote. I hope nobody's trying to go out and do field work, but for the most part, just kind of the planning and document gathering, selections back and forth, document requests. We kind of plan on about a 6-week time frame to make that a smooth audit. And that's a question we get a lot too. How long does the audit take? And it can range. I mean, I can't speak for all auditors, but that's our timeline. Next slide. So here's some of the common audit errors. So these are good to know because, plan sponsors should be aware of these. These are the common audit findings, IRS, DOL, auditors. These are kind of the issues with the plans where things go wrong. Number one is still late remittances. It's pretty inexpensive correction. So, from that standpoint, there's not monetary exposure there, but there is hassle, headache, it takes time. And it also invites, regulator in the door. Department of Labor, this is their number one finding. This is the number one way they kind of open their investigations, get in, and then they have the opportunity to kind of look around and see what else is going on. So, and that's when employers take too long to get that money from the paycheck date into the participant's account. There's really, for small plans under 100, it's a 7-day safe harbor. For large plans, it's discretionary. It's really what the employer can prove was reasonable. Most investigations we see it's 3 or 4 business days is typically what they deem reasonable. Just in our electronic funds transfer environment, that's what it is. Number 2 is plan compensation, and Ari actually alluded to it earlier. He had mentioned he saw that. This can be very costly. I've seen corrections that ranged up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is very important. And this is something you really want to keep an eye on with implementation of a new plan, if it's implementation of a new payroll system, changing in service providers, changes in plan document. It's just really understanding or making sure the plan sponsor understands what the definition of plan compensation. Probably 80 to 90% of the time, it's just W-2. So there's no reason to, it shouldn't be that difficult. It's just making sure the payroll system and the payroll person understands that, everything needs to be deferred on, everything needs to be matched on, unless the plan document says otherwise. You can exclude bonuses and other earnings types, but the two have to sync up. And so if it's not, then the correction is the company has to go in and put money, and that can add up pretty quick if it's a significant earnings code that was left off. I'll skip miscalculation of contributions, but excluded participants and enrollment issues, that's especially in the auto enroll environment, we're seeing more of that. It's just making sure there's a good process in place to capture the new employees that are being auto enrolled. 1 or 2 is not going to be a big correction, but if it's a systematic error, it can add up quick. Don't exclude, the plan document's going to say who you can and cannot exclude. Make sure that's followed as well. It becomes a similar issue to the plan compensation, where if people were excluded and they shouldn't have been excluded, then the employer has to go in and put money on their behalf. And so we'll see that 403Bs, nobody gets excluded except for the kind of the safe harbor, the part-time students and things like that. And then just across the board, a lot of companies have the tendency to exclude part-timers and things like that. It has to specifically say that in the plan doc, and it's usually around hours and things like that as far as eligibility. So just keep an eye on that, or help your clients keep an eye on that, and just make sure they're aware of it. I mean, it's usually a pretty quick conversation, it's something they've maybe never heard before or didn't know was a risk. Non-discrimination test, it's only good as the data that goes into it. And so, part of the audit, we always just kind of just do a quick sanity check on those numbers. And I've seen it all, and I've seen, compensation, columns were missed. I mean, the people's compensation were like, 17,500 across the board. It was like the max 402G limit that year. And that was what was getting picked up for everybody's comp, and things like that, it would have taken seconds to just do a quick sanity check on it. And then if that test, if that test is wrong and it gets caught, a couple years down the road, then the only correction becomes a QNEC, which can be expensive based off the demographic of the employee base, or, kind of the number of non-highly comps. That can become an expensive correction. So non-discrimination tests can pose problems if it's not run correctly and it doesn't get caught, and it turns out a couple years later they find out they didn't pass it, maybe through an IRS audit or something like that. Forfeitures, just use them. Most plan docs tell you you have to use them within a certain time frame or within the year that they're forfeited. So just keep an eye on that. Haven't seen it. It hasn't really been it's not really costly and not a big hot topic, but we do see it quite a bit. And then vesting, just kind of double check the vesting calculation. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so I kind of talked about this one already. We'll move to the next. In the late contributions, that's, you know, I know in some presentations for like advisors, because they're always looking for angles to kind of get in and do some prospecting or introductions on new clients. But 5500s, you know, if you're using those tools to data mine in 5500s, that late contribution box could be an indication that, hey, maybe this client needs some help with their controls if you kind of see that year over year. So it's a good conversation, or at least introduction to be able to have that conversation. Next slide. And then timeless contributions, just, you know, the client should have a process. There shouldn't be one person that does everything and they're the only person that can do that thing. Because if they get sick or vacation or something happens or leave the company, then that company is going to be in a bad spot. So we always like to seek some kind of redundancy, and just making sure if they're still using check, they shouldn't do that anymore. It should all be electronic. Next slide. Okay, plan compensation. This is really just the payroll person understanding the plan and the plan document, and just as it relates to compensation primarily, just making sure that, you know, the two sync up. If there's no exclusions, there's no exclusions on the payroll system as well. All right, next one. And this one, there's the correction is employers have to go in and put money. I've seen some ERISA attorneys be able to kind of, I've seen different numbers. It's typically 50% deferrals, and Ari can chime in if he wants, but you know, I've also seen 25%.
Well, they changed it. They changed it about a year or so ago. It depends on how you, the time frame and when you caught the mistake. It used to always be 50, and then now it's within 3 months. You don't even have to do anything. Then it's like 25, and then if you don't fix it within, I think, 6 months or a year, it's 50.
Okay.
So rules on us.
Okay, yeah, that syncs up with what I saw this last year, so perfect. Next slide. Excluded participants, it's just understanding the plan document. So it's good if there's a plan committee, you know, as part of that kind of looking at expenses, investments, they should also just have a basic understanding of the plan document as it relates to like plan compensation, eligibility, and just make sure that kind of filters through and gets to HR and benefits and payroll and the key process holders that need to understand that to make sure that it's in compliance. Next slide. Okay, we'll go next slide. So here's some kind of best practices that we see from our angle. I mean, obviously, like I just mentioned, the plan committee. Keeping minutes, seems like regulators want to see that documentation more and more about the plan governance side of things. Plan committee, are they taking ownership of this plan? Are they making sure good investments, reasonable expenses, and just oversight on the operations? Understanding the plan provisions. And like I said, there's really very significant plan implementation changes in service providers, especially if that changes the plan document. We've seen plan documents move over and a box wasn't checked, and then it just kind of becomes a scramble, and you know, plan sponsors want to avoid that altogether. And then changes in service providers and things like that. Any kind of event that might cause an issue is a good time to just stop, pause, do a little review, and make sure that everything moved over as it should. Next slide. Okay, and last one on that last slide I mentioned, you don't have to go back, Ari, but hiring good service providers, and that's probably like one of the most important things a fiduciary does, right? Because fiduciaries, they're not experts in this. They shouldn't be experts in it. They got their jobs and everything they need to do. But hiring good service providers is important. So across the board, wherever the service provider is, they should do that. So I'll talk a little about selecting an auditor, because I think a lot of the audit pain points that we hear, it's just, it could be corrected by just hiring an auditor with experience that understands ERISA and benefit plan auditing. So in this slide, yeah, I mentioned, you know, sometimes the corporate auditor is a good fit. They've already got the relationship, they know the company. It just depends if they've got a dedicated group and within that firm that that really does specialize in this. It's a whole different language outside of auditing. You got to understand IRS code, DOL regulation, ERISA, things like that, and then kind of just stay current on what's happening in that space. So they could be a good fit, they might not. We're going to talk about a DOL study in a minute, but some of the stats on the DOL study is the number of auditors is going down. Just 5 years ago when they did the study, it was like 7,000 auditors, I think. And then now we're down closer to 5 based off a DOL presentation I heard a couple of months back. So a lot of CPA firms are exiting it, which makes sense. It's very specialized, and there was just a lot of firms that were doing a couple audits and they just weren't getting done right, and that's what the DOL study kind of came out and told everybody. A lot of scrutiny in the work we do. Our quality assurance has had to go up quite a bit. DOL work paper investigations, peer reviews, higher scrutiny on those. So it's caused a lot of firms to just kind of want to exit the space, which probably needed to happen. We'll go next slide. This is kind of the history of the DOL study. It's the 39% represents the overall deficiency rate, which was extremely high and obviously didn't make the Department of Labor very happy. We'll go next slide. This was the DOL study. This is a strata, and I know a lot of people have probably seen this, but a lot of people still probably haven't seen this. But the overall message here is that the firms that were just doing a handful of audits had much higher deficiency rate, which intuitively makes sense. So counterintuitively, actually quantity is quality, and when it comes to auditing 401k plans, and they found that firms that did over 100 had much lower deficiency rates. So we'll go next slide. So in addition to maybe not getting the best value out of the audit or education or kind of oversight and control, there's also potential for 5,500 filing rejections. DOL has done that. We actually took over, it doesn't happen a lot, but we took over 2 this last year where their 5,500 was rejected by their previous auditor. The DOL rejected it.
Hello.
They had to hire us to come in and reperform the audit. So that can happen. I know we're getting short on time. Let's see what these last couple slides have here. Ari. I just mentioned 5,500. You can go next slide on this one. Some kind of documented decision making is a good practice, whether it's a formal RFP, an informal RFP, just multiple proposals. I've gotten RFPs that are 3 questions: contact information, name of the firm, price, right? And that's probably not a very good fiduciary process. So you definitely want to inquire a little bit more about the commitment to retiring audit plans, and definitely how many audit plans they audit, or how many retirement plans they audit. That was a DOL finding our correlation to quality. We'll go next slide. That's just our quick commercial. We can, let's see, is that, oh yeah, that's the end of it. Okay, we'll go, let me see what questions we have here.
Okay, I got 2 questions for you. Number 1, in an ideal world, if I'm a calendar year plan sponsor, in what month should I start working with the plan auditors in the audit process for a particular year?
That's a great question. It really kind of depends on the client. So the deadlines we need to worry about, and nothing's been affected. Okay, so the only thing that got affected was the extended June 30th deadline, which hit on 4/15 2 days ago. That actually got pushed along with all the other IRS deadlines, right? That got pushed out 90 days. But the 7/31, which is the calendar year filing date, is not been touched yet. I know ARA is trying to push for at least automated extensions to where you wouldn't have to file a Form 5558. I haven't heard that that's come through yet. So 7/31 is still the main deadline for all the calendar plans, which are the bulk of the filing dates. And then that can get extended to October 15th. So you don't want to wait. If this is a first year audit, you should get an earlier start because there'll be a little bit more documentation gathering and maybe just a little more inquiry and just having to sort through things. So it kind of depends. If you're working with a firm that, you know, has a typical corporate and tax season, they may not be able to get started until May or June. If, you know, we're starting audits as early as February once record keeper packages are ready. So we've got clients that want to get this done out of the way as soon as possible. We got some that are just insistent on filing extension, worrying about it later. We try to manage that flow because we can't audit almost 600 plans in August and September. So, you know, we're managing the flow and trying to work with the plan sponsors that want to file early. But I always recommend, you know, probably most companies need to kind of get through their tax and first quarter, you know, closing out the books and all that. And then usually by about April, they're ready to kind of transition. As far as service providers, record keepers, we're seeing audit packages as early as like late February, until some don't provide them until June. Most of them come in sometime between March 15th and May 1st is when we see most of the audit packages come in. So in some cases, you can't start an audit till May anyways, because the record keeper won't have the reports ready. But most of the reports are ready by sometime in April. And so that's always a good time to kind of get the audit started, is what we found.
Okay, what is the reasonable remittance safe harbor time for plans that have more than 100 employees?
So it really depends on the DOL investigator. You know, there's really no exact answer. The wording says as soon as it can be reasonably segregated from the general assets of the company, but no later than 15 business days after month end. Well, 15 business, and that was written in the 70s, right? So 15 business days after month end, I mean, that's okay. Yeah, we're gonna, you know, a bunch of manual processes, put the check in the mail, and, you know, however long that all takes. That made sense. Nowadays, it really doesn't make sense. As auditors, you know, it's kind of this gray judgment. What can you reasonably defend, right? As auditors, we're not in the position where we're, you know, penalizing company. It's not our authority to go in and tell them if it's late. If it's after the 15 business days after a month, then obviously we've got no choice. It's black and white at that point. We have to tell them it's late. If it's sometime between that and say 3 or 4 business days, then we have the conversation that, you know, you're now in a position where you got to defend why that's not, why you wouldn't deem that late, or if you want to just be proactive and deem it late, that's management's decision. But, you know, that's kind of, now you're in a position of having to defend yourself against potentially a DOL investigation. 3 or 4 business days is what we typically say is pretty reasonable. And, you know, that's what we've seen when it comes to DOL investigations that they've kind of allowed people to do. They're looking for consistency. So if you're getting in all your deposits on one day, and then you have one that goes 5 days, they may deem the 5 days as late. They may say, hey, well, you've been showing that you can do it in 1 day, and this one took 5, so it was kind of deemed that you borrowed money. Your correction is probably going to be, you know, $5, and now you got to go split the $5 between 200 participants, which, you know, is completely silly, but that's, you know, that's the way it is. But, you know, so I think 3 to 4 business days is what I would say we've kind of seen as being acceptable.
Last question. This is a good one because I've had to deal with a lot of BCP stuff on the DOL side. Regarding late remittances, do you see the IRS ever enacting a de minimis safe harbor for the 10% excise tax on lost earnings on late remittances? Seems silly to have to file 5330s when the excise tax is a nominal amount.
I haven't heard anything as far as the discussion on that. I agree with you, and like I just said, splitting even the correction itself, splitting $5 between 200 participants seems silly. So now you're talking that the excise tax on that 10% is like, what are we doing? I mean, the cost to mail that or even affect that transaction is much more expensive. But I wouldn't know that. I don't know. So no answer for that.
Okay, John, where can they reach you?
The last slide had the contact information. You can reach pensioninsurance.com, it's our website, jrussin@pensioninsurance.com. Email there. I'm happy to answer any questions. This is all we do, so we love talking about it, and we're happy just to be a resource and answer questions for anybody.
Thank you. And let me
Thank
get
you.
that last slide up just so that they have the contact information.
Okay.
One of these days I'll get the hang of it, but till those days.
On the COVID front, I meant to mention that, because the measurement date of participant count is the first day of the plan year, a lot of these, if companies have major layoffs and they go under 100, they're probably still going to be in an audit next year because the measurement date is January 1st for the calendar plan. So keep that in mind. Something to kind of just talk through. And then I'll stop now, but I was going to go a little bit into MEPS, but we're done.
I appreciate that. A couple of things of housekeeping, I guess. Today was supposed to be, I was supposed to be in Houston, Texas for that 401k conference in Houston. We also had a 401k conference as well going to be in St. Louis. Those, of course, are going to have to be rescheduled. And then we have an event in Minnesota on June the 5th, I believe. Hopefully we can have it. Doubtful that we can. We'll have to reschedule all the events. We hopefully will be in Las Vegas in December. Go to that 401ksite.com for further information on how you can sign up for those events. Most importantly, next week, we're going to try to do that 401k plan sponsor forum. So we're going to take what we have, this 401k conference, try it on the plan sponsor level. We're doing it next week. If you're a plan provider and you want to participate and sponsor it, you could be like the presenter today and have a 30-minute presentation to plan sponsors. While today we had 288 people sign up. Right now, plan sponsor, because their interest is very limited compared to people who are in the business. We have about 30 people signed up for that. And if you want to be a part of it, just holler, or as they say, email me, and we can make it happen. And again, that'll be next week. Again, it'll start at 11 a.m. Eastern. Our next presentation is going to be James Holland. James, are you there?
I am.
Good. We like to see that. And let me get your presentation up. One of these days I'll get it right. And where is my share button? Share screen. There we go. And there we go. Okay.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having us again, Ari. We appreciate it. To piggyback off of some of the other gentlemen before me, Ari is by far the most advisor-centric ERISA attorney in the country. So for those who have not had the opportunity, I strongly encourage you to work with him. We've had for over a decade, and he's an invaluable part of our team, which is part of the conversation today. Just to give you a little quick background, Millennium is an SEC registered RIA. Our sole focus is in the qualified plan space. Our business is a little different because 95% of it comes from outside advisors. We work in either a 316, 321, 338 capacity or a combination thereof for the advisors. We have some training programs we put together for advisors who are either looking to get into the business or help take their business to the next level. As has already been said in a couple of the presentations, the importance of staying on top of folks. So one of the things that we try to stress is, again, the all or nothing mentality that has unfortunately been a part of the financial service industry for decades needs to disappear, because that defensive mechanism is going to get you in trouble, because very simply, as the slide shows, 100% of nothing is far worse than 20% of something. So advisors who want to compete in this space will learn to give up a few basis points to bring in some professionals to help, hold that plan in place, but also hopefully grow the business as well. Yeah, Art. Couple of things, again, nothing new here, but just to reiterate, for as far as your most valuable asset, time is clearly it. So therefore, we try to help advisors use that in the most efficient aspect possible. We understand that paying the bills are important. So as a financial advisor, you might not just be doing the rest of business. So one of the things we talk to when we start partnering with advisors is exactly how much time. Is it 5 hours a week? Is it 10? Is it 20? And then from there, build the plan that they need to best use that time to help grow that practice there, because obviously the money aspect, we can always get more of. The time aspect, we can't. some myths within the space in terms of advisors. Why do I want to bring in other people in terms of, oh, wait, Ari, if you pop back, thank you. No, wait, one more. One of the things I hear advisors about, one of their concerns in terms of bringing in a 321 or a 338 or someone to help with is their value is picking the funds. Your value is not picking the funds, okay? I would be willing to bet a nice dinner somewhere at a steakhouse out of the 100 and some odd people on here, not one person has ever gotten a call from a plan sponsor that said, I can't thank you enough for the fun lineup that you've chosen for us. It's been great. And the participants call on a regular basis to tell us that. So the idea of the fund picking as being the value, it is a myth, and you're better off using professionally managed folks who can handle that, so you can focus on the education and or financial advising or the other aspects of the business. A financial advisor is not an ERISA expert. Again, just because you're in this space doesn't mean you're good at it, just like John had brought up with regards to the auditors, okay? A lot of folks do the audit in the box, and yes, for $2,000, I can get something that someone else is charging $12,000. No, you can't, okay? You're gonna get what you pay for. If you're gonna operate, Ari is an ERISA attorney. That's what Ari does. Ari could do a lot of other law things, but rarely do you find attorneys who do ERISA do anything else because it's so encompassing with regards to the practice. Well, financial advisors are no different as far as that goes. You want to make sure the person has the ability to speak in all terms, not just from an investment perspective. Can they handle VCP? Do they work with the IRS? Have they worked with the DOL? Do they work with the risk litigators or defenders? Have they been involved in any of those processes? So therefore, not only can they protect you, but they can protect the client as well. Good, Ari. The money is in the plan. So the days of the 50 basis points to show up every 2.3 years to talk to the CFO and go golfing are gone. They're not coming back. Revenue sharing is gone. It's not coming back. We've been pushing flat dollar for advisors for a decade, and I think there are quite a few who work with us who are quite happy that they've switched to that model. The idea is that the money is in the participants in the plan. And if you develop yourself as the go-to person, not just for the plan sponsor, but for those participants as well, that's where you'll make the money. So the advisors we work with make $7 outside of the plan for every dollar they have inside of the plan, because they can focus on the services they want to provide because they've outsourced the other services to professionals who handle what they need to do to help protect them. So get our plan sponsors, okay, they don't want a jack of all trades, okay? They're looking for, they don't want one person. So you can't be the person who answers every question for the plan sponsor, because they're going to question whether you have any other clients or what else you do besides the retirement plan. That's why you want to have that outsourcing that Lyle had brought up, and I'm sure Ron and Jeff and Mark will speak to, as well as Ari has spoken to. We have two folks here who are attorneys, but they're not ERISA attorneys. So we go to Ari because that's what Ari does, okay? We don't do record keeping. We go to guys or TPA work. That's why we go to guys like Ron, because we want to make sure that we have the best people in the space handling that to take care of it, therefore making us more efficient and certainly the books of business more profitable. So you want to find a team approach when it comes to find what you want to do, but then build around that with the people who can help maintain that for you. Yeah, Dar. All right, get it again. Yep. How to build a successful practice, okay, just like anything else, okay, this is a volume business in terms of it's a 5 to 7 touch business, and I would argue that might even be extended. I think one of the people brought up during Lyle's presentation the fact that, marketing in this space is going to slow down because people are worried about keeping the lights on and paying their employees, so that might stretch out. This is I try to tell the advisors that we work with, this is not a sit down at the kitchen table, sign this piece of paper and we're off and running. It's a 9 to 12 month sales process. So you want to make sure that you're putting the funnel in place. And by that, I mean, we put together, when the advisors we work with who really want to grow the practice from this standpoint, $250 million of planned business in the funnel at any given time, with the exception, obviously, of one $250 million plan. But the idea being is if you can generate a email list, phone conversation, follow-up, webinar, people you've been in contact with, have met with, if you have 250 million in the funnel at any given time, at least once a month, something falls out the bottom, whether it's $1 million plan, $5 million plan, $15 million plan, that all changes obviously. But if you're touching that amount of business on a consistent basis via conversation, drips, and whatnot, you can develop a very substantial qualified plan practice. Again, one of the things here, I think Lyle spoke a little bit to it as well. Surround yourself with some smart people, okay? People do not want to be lectured about ERISA and retirement plans, okay? Focus on what you do and bring in the other people to help strengthen that argument. I know a lot of times when we get started, advisors get worried, well, if I bring some other advisor in, how does that impact my relationship? Am I going to find myself in trouble? No, you won't. Plan sponsors actually enjoy it. They believe it has a lot of credibility because you're strengthening the position and you're showing that you have a true concern for them and you're not trying to be that jack of all trades that we talked about. Lastly, again, this was more towards the presentation that we did in Disney, so that's why we threw in this last slide, but you have to be able to let go. I know it's difficult, you have the relationship, but in order for this to be a success, you cannot do the me, wrap my arms around it, not let anyone else in, because you will find yourself on the short end of the stick, because in order to get successful in this space, you're going to have to start automating, you're going to have to start putting systems in place. So therefore, because the margins are getting squeezed at every end, whether it's the advisor fee, the record keeping fee, the investment fees, there is only so much juice you can squeeze out of the lemon. So you want to make sure that, again, you're using it in the most efficient and profitable manner possible. So that's why forming that team is important, and delegating and letting go is going to be a big part of helping you continue that growth. Dar. Again, final thoughts. As far as plan changes go, we talked about the marketing aspect. Well, that 14.7, that's how long a plan stays with an advisor. Okay, it's a very sticky business, so that's why it's a great one to be in. I already discussed the amount from a dollar perspective. Fixing what they need and to give you what you want. Again, therefore, making sure that you're listening and finding out what the problem is that you're trying to solve, okay? Don't put the solution in until you know exactly what it is they're looking for, because as soon as you fix that, then they give the opportunity to do other things for them, whether it's financial planning, individual wealth management, if you do benefits, P&C, whatever the case may be. Take care of the pressing issue, and then the other stuff will take care of itself. From the win-win-win perspective, plan sponsors protected, okay? From a fiduciary perspective, because you brought in a team to help address that issue. The advisor is, because they're maintaining the relationship, have revenue streams, able to develop some other business outside of that, and yourself. Again, this is not a philanthropic endeavor, all right? But this is an opportunity to grow a business where you can make a difference, but also make, a very good living as well. I know I blew through that pretty quickly, but the idea being is we're here as a resource, just like Ari is, for any advisor, whether you're looking to jump into the business or take it to the next level. As far as resources, a fairly deep team from an ERISA perspective. 18 months ago, we were given a patent on a investment evaluation tool that is going to be significant, not just for plan sponsors, but also for auditors to help protect that. So it's a completely different conversation. We don't have a product. Just like Lyle said, we just have the solution. We work with advisors from all different backgrounds, BDs, hybrids, RIAs. We work with practically every recce keeper and TPA in the space. So if anyone is looking for some insights into, how to develop moving forward as the industry changes, we're happy to help in any way we can.
Okay, questions. We know where we've been in the industry over the past 10 years. Where do you see it going within the next 10 years?
Yep. So one of the things that we focused on, and will be coming out actually in about a week or so, that automation I spoke to. So we've partnered with a record keeping firm and the folks over at Russell Investments, and we're going to DBify the DC plan. So just like MEPs and PEPs are going to be a big thing, we have an individual DC plan that will provide fiduciary protection, not just on the plan level, but on the participant level as well. So each participant will go in and get a customized portfolio based on the menu that we put in place. So we act as the 338 for the menu. Russell acts as the 338 for the participant. So you're going to type in a bunch of data. It's going to help make that portfolio designed for each individual person, therefore automating the process for the advisor, but also the system will allow you to ask questions about outside assets and gathering, so you can have an opportunity there to have a full conversation, not just a 401k or 403b. So we see a lot more automation in the space, obviously, like everything else from a technology standpoint. And from a advisor perspective, again, I think it's more of a quarterback, and you have to pick and choose where you're going to do the education and where you're going to, for the, those smaller groups, you're not going to do education for a plan with 5,000 people, but you can be the quarterback. But, you find a doctor group that has 20, 30, 50 employees, you can still be that, sit down there and do the education. It's just a matter of how you're going to allocate your time.
Here's another question. A lot of the large bundled providers are using something called shelf space payments. How do you see that coming to play in the future?
Yeah, again, it was probably 8 or 10 years ago. I think Ari and I were at the same conference, and we had brought up the fact that we didn't believe revenue sharing was going to last. Granted, it lasted a little longer than we thought. I think the shelf space is going to become an issue as well, in terms of people are getting more information quicker. I think litigation is going to pick up dramatically. I think the fee aspect has ended, but the second shoe, which was the bigger shoe, which we believed was coming years ago, from an investment, from a process standpoint, is going to be important. And that's going to start detailing where the money comes from, who's actually gotten paid, and what have you gotten for that service there. So I think again, over time, it won't happen, instantaneously, but I do think that's going to dry up relatively quickly. We've done a bunch of work recently, both on the plaintiff and the defense side, and these are the type of questions that are coming up. BDs that are taking money that aren't doing anything, even though they think, wait, I'm paying out 90, 95% to my advisors. Well, what is the broker dealer doing for that 5 or 10% they're keeping? And a lot of them can't answer it from a qualified plan perspective. So there's going to be certainly more microscopic look into all of the dollars and who's getting them. So we think that's going to be an area that will eventually have to find its way out of the business as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put my 2 cents. So I kind of flubbed the introduction of James by just going to James. And it's funny, LinkedIn always sends you these anniversary dates, and you don't know the anniversary dates. And apparently this week was 10 years that I started this business, and you were like one of the first people that I actually contacted. Well, you contacted me first on LinkedIn because we were dealing with somebody who was kind of nutty and said, plan sponsors aren't going to get sued for high fees. You're selling, you're selling fake services. Plan sponsors aren't going to, and which was kind of funny when you look at it. And I think if you look at my writings from the time when fee disclosure was being talked about, I'll have to find it. It's somewhere where I predicted that plan providers were going to find ways around fee disclosure. There's a certain GPA that I used to, uh, say bad things about because I used to work there. And I remember they came out with they were collecting revenue sharing fees and they weren't, doing the right thing with it. And they created a new fee. They said there was going to be custodial daily access fee, and it was going to be 25 bips, which, was not a fee that existed. So I find that, you got to give them credit because I think the shelf space payments is very, very clever because it is a complete loophole in the fee disclosure rules because the money's changing hands outside of the plan sponsor. The plan sponsor is not paying for it. So money's changing hands. It's a new form of payola. And from what I understand, some mutual fund companies were expecting Vanguard not to be a part of this, program. And I understand that Vanguard has found its way in. And so a lot of these traditionally actively managed funds were very, very upset that Vanguard got involved and, they're rethinking their involvement in the program. I just think that what's going to happen is eventually the Department of Labor is going to catch wise to it and then they're going to close down that loophole. Just my thing.
When, who knows? Exactly.
So that's it. I get James, where can they reach you? Because I didn't see an address on the.
I am sorry. Yep. So the email is James H. So JAMESH at Mira MIRA Center CENTER miracenter.com or 704-743-3226. Website is fix401k.com.
Oh, I didn't even know that one. To me, it's always the Mira. Actually, I think I do have one question.
Go to the same place. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Here's one last question.
Yes.
When will insurance companies have to comply with fee disclosure for separate accounts and stable value funds?
Yeah. So there's the $64,000 question for the folks old enough in the room to remember the game show. Yeah. Good question. I wish it was tomorrow. As far as have I heard anything? Remember, I think they are the second biggest lobby in the country behind the NRA from a dollar perspective. So they spent, when we're talking about fee disclosure, so back in 2009, we were asked to help write the House resolution that became the 408B2 notice. And I believe it was $1.5 million a day they were spending to prevent the 408B2 notice. So Lord knows how much they'll spend to make sure that no one understands that the spread is actually the cost. So hopefully someday soon, but that one there, I would not hold a lot of hope out for at the moment. So,
well, they did get their money's worth with the Secure Act.
No. So,
they got their hands back in. So, okay, yes. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Again, like I said, at this age, we've got to take advantage of these breaks. And we'll be back at 1:10 with FPS Trust, who's going to give a great presentation on automatic rollovers because nobody's thinking about it. They're just going along with whatever their TPA tells them they should put the automatic rollovers. So we'll be back in 15 minutes. And again, anybody who needs the slides, just email me and it's not going to be a problem to send them out. So we'll be back.
Thanks,
okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
can you hear me?
Before we start back up in about a minute or two, just again, thank you for being a part of this. I have to say that the idea from this, of doing it virtually, Chuck Hammond's idea, I was talking to him right after the Disney event. So Chuck Hammond came up with the idea of, he's like, oh, why don't you try a virtual event? So Chuck Hammond of the 401k study group, he's somebody that if you haven't heard about, somebody should go look on his website, try to connect with him on LinkedIn. He's an excellent resource for advisors and other plan providers in helping them build their business. So again, I'd love to take credit for it, but I know I can't because I didn't come up with the idea, and that was Chuck's idea. And I really was amazed by the outpour of support. I figured that I was going to get 100 people to show up. Within 2 or 3 days, over 100 people signed up. And as we speak, I think it was up to, at one point, 288. Of course, people who have left, or you have to leave, obviously, I know with events, it takes 4 or 5 hours of your time. And obviously now that we're home, we have other things that we have to tend to, not only business, but also family considerations as well. The video, I believe, will be on demand through Zoom. So once I find out where that link is, it's being recorded. So if you have to leave, there is the opportunity that it's been recorded and you could come back right to it. It's been like I said, this reminds me of the very, very first 401k conference. We did that at Citi Field in 2018. And when you run the event for the very, very first time, there are a lot of things that work, quite a few things that don't. I realized that when my buddy Larry brings in the athlete, he should bring it after all the presentations have been concluded. We learned that the hard way at Citi Field. So, it's a work in progress. Whatever we like from the first event, we change for the upcoming events. So unfortunately, with the way things are going, we'll probably have to do another virtual conference in May. If you're interested to be a part of it again, as a sponsor, as an attendee, find information about that. We'll probably do another one of these in May sometime, probably the day of what would have been the St. Louis event, which would have been great to be in St. Louis and go see the Mets play that night. But we'll have to make other arrangements for probably the way it's going, probably August and September. Our next presentation is going to be from FPS Trust. Jeff Lankowski and Mark Copen. I know these fellows from quite some time now. They've been presenting at the events over the past year or so. They have really what I say is a great program in terms of automatic rollovers, because the fact of the matter is that that is one part of 401k plans that most plan sponsors and most plan providers ignore. They just follow whatever their TPA says. The TPA selects a certain automatic rollover provider just because they just know somebody's name or whatnot, and even the TPA doesn't really vet out who the automatic provider has. So again, without further ado, it's Mark Copen and Jeff Lankowski from FPS Trust.
Thanks, Ari. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you joining our presentation, and want to take you through a few things regarding the auto rollover process, as Ari said, but we also have ways that you can utilize auto rollovers to your benefit, reduce risks, and also our ability to provide an IRA solution that can increase your personal rewards. So I want to start off, again, my name is Mark Keppen, and been with FPS since 2017. I'm going to give you a little background now. Next slide, Ari, on what the DOL has been doing related to addressing and targeting missing participants. really give you some background as to how all this started, and then go through some of the services we found that are most important to plan sponsors. And when they're selecting a safe harbor IRA provider, we're seeing more and more RFPs on this situation, and just want to give you some background on, you know, what's being searched for more often by plan sponsors. And we're going to talk a little bit about a solution that you can use with your clients and ways you can promote your value to them and show your expertise. And then my colleague Jeff Lankowski is going to take over and explain some of the things we do on customizing IRAs for advisors and ways to help you capture assets and create more reoccurring income that you're looking for. So here we're going to talk about the missing participants and how the DOL got started targeting these. And DOL began investigating the uncashed checks several years back. They asked for public input on the changes to the 5500, which included a requirement to report the number of uncashed checks that are in the plans. And in 2016, they put together an initiative, a pilot program to evaluate the magnitude of uncashed checks. And the program revealed that they have an enormous issue. They collected more than $326 million in fines and benefits for these missing participants. And that forced them to announce a formal enforcement action in 2018, which gave the EBSA a mandate to begin auditing exclusively for missing participants. Now, some plan sponsors don't even realize that they have a responsibility to continue looking for these people, let alone corresponding with those participants, and may believe that the record keeper is responsible or the record keeper's process is adequate to comply with their fiduciary duty. So the fact is the DOL says it's a plan's responsibility to establish written procedures and to execute those. And the plan sponsor is on the hook to clean up uncashed checks. And DOL is taking it seriously and are actively targeting many companies. So I know one employer that actually had a DOL investigation for missing participants, and the employer was arguing that their service agreement with the record keeper addressed how those were to be handled, and they were relying on the record keeper to handle the uncashed checks and deal with the stale dated checks as well. Well, the DOL obviously disagreed and ended up fining the employer $250,000 for 50 outstanding stale dated checks. So imagine if this is your client, the administrator is going to be coming to you as the advisor to help put pressure on the record keeper to share in their fine. Because the plan administrator doesn't want to admit they're wrong to their senior management when they have to go crawling to them for $250,000 to cover the fine. So you have a record keeper and a plan sponsor that are at odds, and there really is no reason for them to be at odds, because really you're in a no-win situation at this point. So what can you do to avoid this? Well, the answer really lies with the fiduciary's election of the IRA provider and how they structure the plan document. And it's important that I point out, as Ari said before, that selecting an IRA provider for the force outs is a fiduciary decision. And just selecting what the TPA offers or what the record keeper offers often is not the best solution. So it's really up to you as the advisor to make sure that your sponsors are aware of their duty and to help them make the proper evaluation. So I'm going to take you through some of the facts that are essential in comparing not all of our providers, which will help you in your evaluation and recommendations to your plan sponsors. So when the DOL changed the regs in 2005, next slide, Artie. they required the accounts over $1,000 to be rolled into an IRA. And at that time, they had no idea that millions of these accounts are going to still be sitting around years later. They expected these accounts would sit there for a short time and transition when people decided to move their account to another IRA or another retirement plan. However, providers saw this as an opportunity to capture assets and accounts on missing participants, where they can charge them fees for the services they perform, and they really have no requirement to be proactive in searching for a new address, and they do little to maintain contact with the participant. Now, I've worked with hundreds of different plan sponsors, and I've continued to hear over and over again that these three issues are now driving their decisions when they're selecting a provider. First, they want to know, how often are we looking for a new address? Second, are the fees, what are the admin fees for the participant? And also, what are the other fees that are charged for other services? And then they want to know about the default fund, what the crediting rate is. Is it protected? Are there any assurances or guarantees that those participants are being treated fairly? So FPS isn't going to follow that old model of sitting on these accounts. We're doing things differently. We know that the plan sponsors want their former employees protected, and we're taking steps to be proactive and offer better protection for them. So we're searching for a new address on these accounts prior to sending out the welcome letter. We do 2 additional address searches in the first year. And in the second year and every year thereafter, we're doing an address search before we send out the annual statement. And on the anniversary of the account, we're searching for another address. If we receive an updated address, we're sending out another welcome kit. So being proactive and continually communicating with these participants, we find is more beneficial and just part of our center operating procedure. Now, we also use a group annuity contract for the default fund. Besides offering the lowest fee for the services for the IRA, the investment is fully liquid. There are no restrictions on it. And the participant actually has better coverage or protection from the State Guarantee Association, because each account that they have is guaranteed up to $250,000. Now, the FDIC insured bank funds, those are aggregated, and they only get $250,000 for that for the aggregation of those accounts. So we're trying to provide better protection, and this fund also guarantees a credited interest rate. The minimum guarantee is 1%, so the rate can never go below that to the participant. And our current credited rate is well above that minimum. Given the market today, where short-term rates have dropped to 0, these participants are absolutely better off. So we've been focusing on the more important concerns from these plan sponsors, and we know that we're providing really the best value to the plan sponsor, as it's their fiduciary decision, and to their former participants. Now, the reason that you were hired by the plan is to provide counsel and align the goals for the plan, the investments, and the record keeping. And part of your job is to find ways to reduce risk and cut down on their administrative work. So while it isn't usually top of mind issue with the plan sponsor to talk about force outs on the plan, this will resonate with them once they start thinking about how much work they put into it. So one simple and remarkably effective change you can adopt and have your employers adopt in their plan is to roll over all of the accounts under 1,000, in addition to the force outs between 1,000 and 5,000. So now you're targeting the root cause of the DOL's enforcement action. You're reducing the work and the number of outstanding checks that would exist in their plan. And you're eliminating the work that the sponsor is putting into looking for these missing participants. So if you're looking to provide offers or provide value to your plan sponsors, this was a freebie for you. I mean, this isn't going to cost your client a dime, and it's reducing their risk, and it buys you goodwill with them because you're working in their best interest. So just to take this a step farther, how does this impact the plan's pricing? We all know that pricing is based on the number of employees that are participating in the plan and average account balance. So if you can significantly reduce the number of people that are requiring administrative services and increasing the average account value, it's worth your time to go back to the record keeper and look at renegotiating the costs. So now, not only are you reducing the risk to the employer, you're offering that employer the ability to do what's in the best interest of all participants in the plan and reducing their costs. So this is a good exercise to make sure that your plans are competitively priced. Plus, it protects your plans from other advisors that are looking to try and steal your business. Likewise, you can also use the 5500s to research new targets for you to go after. Find those advisors that are asleep at the wheel and use this information to help reduce their costs from an administrative basis and show them how you're proactively reducing their risk. So remember, selecting an IRA provider is the final fiduciary act the plan sponsor makes when dealing with these forced out accounts. So they need to be confident that their selection is in the best interest of those former employees. So now I've gone through a bit about the missing participants and the mandatory IRA and what you can do to help position yourself better with your employees and align the operations of their plan document to reduce the amount of work and risk that they are exposed to. Now, Jeff is going to take over and explain a little bit more about how he can capitalize your opportunities into a monetary reward using our voluntary IRA. Jeff?
Thanks, Mark. All right, next slide would be great. So what we're looking at, going around this circle clockwise, Mark touched a lot on the auto rollovers, safe harbor, missing participants, uncashed checks, et cetera. Bringing it full circle, what about the over 5,000 balances that can't be forced out? Those are the ones that we can only merely encourage to leave the plan. We can't force those out. And what I'd like to focus on are the ones that are below your particular dollar threshold. Whether that threshold is 25,000, 50,000, 75, it doesn't matter. It's kind of a gap per se. And so what we've done here at FPS is we've created a completely paperless white label IRA, which hopefully can fully optimize opportunities for fee-based advisors. It's basically a platform where our partners have the ability to monetize every IRA they can and provides a lot of scalability for you. When doing this, we use your funds, your models, and we also permit the use of low-cost institutional share classes, regardless of account size. And I think that's a big differentiator in the marketplace where a lot of other IRAs don't provide that, where a $25,000, $30,000 account, they can't get access to that type of iShare. What we strive for is a seamless transition from your site to ours. We're going to brand it with your logo, your colors, your wording, etc. And then we're going to get into an account setup. Once we're there, it literally takes about 5 minutes to set up an account. And then that individual is looking at an account once it's funded. I do want to stress we're B2B. We are not B2C. We're here to support our partners. We do not compete in any way, shape, or form for individual accounts. Everything we want to do is through you as distribution. So once the account is actually set up, the next couple of screens, we're just going to take a look at some screenshots, and I'm going to show you some different views. So if you wouldn't mind, perfect. Thank you, Ari. For our partners, what you're looking at is a back office access for your branded IRA as an advisor. We're going to show you a global view summary page, which is the top one there with the cougar or panther. There you're going to see your accounts, your assets, investments. You're going to see utilization. All of that information is going to be right there, able to be sorted on one page. Our partners, we give them the ability to drill down on their book. They can drill all the way down to an individual account view, so that if you are on the phone with an individual account holder, you literally can see the same view that they will see. Unlike calling a customer service and they're going to see a summary while the account holder is looking at something different, you literally can look at the exact same view that account holder is looking at while you're on the phone with them, if need be. And we think that's pretty unique. We also provide the ability for reporting, both viewing it and exporting it. And then as far as customized fees, we can pay those directly to you, or we can send them to your OSJ or your BD. As far as an individual account holder, I believe that's the next slide, Ari. This is what the account holder sees. You see on the left side, it is clear and simple communication. They have similar views, and they can access their account from any computer or smart device, and the screens adjust appropriately. It's basically everything they need to manage their account from their fingertips. Shows access to their advisor. We provide your information every which way, because most importantly, we want to tie this to you. On the summary page, they're going to see a balance, inflows and outflows. They'll see earnings, investment positions, and we break it up in various charts showing the same in different forms to make it easy for them to understand. They can rebalance, they can make contributions, and they can request withdrawals through this. What's pretty unique is requesting statements on demand, not just quarterly, but we give them the ability, if they wanted to have a specialized statement, say from February 12th through yesterday, April 16th, it's at their fingertips. They can go in and not just get a boilerplate quarterly statement, they can get a fully customized statement. What we're looking at the screenshot in the middle, should you choose, we have the ability to give you guys access to a full suite of education and wellness resources. And this is comprised of a lot of articles, videos, etc. It's not proprietary in any way, shape, or form. This could be your education offering. And you also have the ability to add additional articles, additional PowerPoints, additional videos, etc. Some of the topics that we throw in here, investing and saving, retirement, budgeting, debt elimination, college funding, preparing a will. It's just all very generic information for financial wellness to kind of tie the bow on everything that we're doing. Next slide, if you wouldn't mind. So here at FPS Trust, we strive to provide an innovative, scalable solution for advisors, and we want you to use this to your advantage. Augment your approach. Again, it is a white label IRA that helps you monetize every IRA, and that's regardless of account size. Or should you choose and you don't want to go this by yourself, you can partner with a 338, like a couple of those that spoke earlier today. Either way, FPS Trust is here to help. Next slide, Aaron. So in summary, Mark talked about auto rollovers and missing participants and the ease of using us as a destination. We briefly touched on capturing more assets with a white label IRA. Hopefully we can support your business on those two fronts. But most importantly, both of which, we're here to promote you, and we're here to support you any way we can. So with that, I'll thank you for your time, and I believe, Ari, we can open it up for some questions if there are any.
And of course there are. Number one, I realize that small balance rollovers are probably not a priority for plan sponsors right now, but with the coronavirus pandemic driving down average account balances, won't it be even more important than ever to clean up small balances in order to keep up average balances from declining even more, since that is a factor in record keeping pricing?
Yes. Thank you, Ari. There's really two keys to this. One, as the question pointed out, it is important to remove those small balances to help maintain a higher average account balance. But you also have the issue that you touched on earlier, and that's partial plan terminations. And when you're trying to deal with a crisis like this, you know, this isn't the first thing that people are thinking about. And if you're looking to, if a plan sponsor really wants to try and help out these participants, like I said in my presentation, you want somebody who's actively looking for these people. If they're moving, if they're in transition, you want a provider that's going to keep up with them and help them get their money. And in a partial plan term, there are, you know, a lot of people that are going to be in this situation, and you need somebody with the flexibility to help the plan sponsors in those situations. And a couple of things that I didn't point out in our presentation was things that we do to help the employers through that process with notification mailings, address searches outside of the normal process of setting up an IRA. So if you're needing help with your plan sponsors to look for these individuals, we can help provide that service outside of setting up an IRA. If they need notification help, other services related to the benefits, and they don't have the manpower to do the notifications, we can help with that as well. So we're here to really support you as an advisor, support the plan sponsors the best way we can, and that's doing things that aren't necessarily tied to a force out IRA.
Next question, and so far final question. What are your thoughts on auto portability? Can FBS do auto portability?
Auto portability is really a process in matching up a participant as they move to different employers. And while that is a granted function specifically for one organization, we go about it in a similar manner when we're talking to the participants. Our client service reps take the time to understand where that participant is and help them navigate that process of deciding what to do with that money. And one of the first questions is, are you currently working somewhere else that has a retirement plan? And have you thought about moving that account over to that plan? And we will do a lot of the work to help them get that account moved over to their new employer. So while it's not technically automated portability, I think we offer, you know, a more altruistic approach to helping the participant, and, you know, just being part of our service to do that without charging additional fees to get that done. So while I think it's a good idea, I think there's you know, less expensive ways to get that done for the participant and help them save more of their account.
Okay, let me see. One more question. Uh, just the note to confirm that the auto IRA for that one provider doesn't work for the Roth 401k monies unless the goal is to leave the Roth monies in a Roth IRA versus transfer to the successor employer plan. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm reading the question too, and I'm not sure that I understand the question or the comment.
Yeah, I mean, most of the money that you're dealing with tend to be pre-tax deferrals. Those, the IRA. The IRA product tends to be, participant deferrals or employer contributions or whatnot.
Well, I mean, there's not really. I mean, we get a lot of plans that have Roth money in them, and we take over a lot of Roth accounts from retirement plans, and we set up a Roth IRA for those individuals. So, I mean, we get a mix of both. Yeah, pre-tax is the predominant source of the accounts, but we do Roth IRAs and can manage those for the participants and the force outs as well.
Yeah, I think that here the follow-up was the auto IRA DOL approved moves money from the plan to an IRA. It can't then move the 401k monies to successor employers' Roth 401k account. That's just a comment that they're making.
Okay, yeah.
Which is
correct. Yep.
Okay. And
Thanks for clarifying that, Jack.
okay, that's not a problem. So we're going to take, I guess, a 5-minute break and then come back and finish this conference off. Like I said, with the way things are going, this will be the first of hopefully not many. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So we're going to be back in about a minute or two with Ron Stair, who is a third-party administrator in East Meadow, New York, not that far from me in Oceanside. Thanks for being a part of it. Like I said, it was a great idea to have this, and Chuck Hammond, again, thank you. And we'll probably have to do this again in another few weeks. And like I said before, hopefully not the first of many. Hopefully we'll be out of this sooner than later. I can only deal so much with my kids not being in school. Instead of working at the beginning, you got to help them with their homework or whatnot. But it is what it is. Things could be worse. I think of people that I know that have lost people to coronavirus. So we'll try to do this again, probably next couple of weeks, probably the day I should have been in St. Louis. But again, priorities are more important things to consider than just my desire to go see a Cardinals game. But again, hopefully we'll be back up and running in June in Minnesota. Chances are we're probably not, based on the way Major League Baseball is not moving along. Of course, go to that formerkside.com for further information. If you want to be part as a presenter for next week's conference for plan sponsors, you could be that as well. If you want to be part as a presenter for our next virtual 401k conference, like I said, I'm thinking about the day, was it May 8th is the day, I think. We'll let you know about that. Knowing me, I'll probably have it up and running within a day or so. And again, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this. Again, it's a work in progress. A lot of things I love about this first initial conference. I know a couple things I'd like to change, but that's the beauty of planning things out and changing and going with the change and going with the flow. So our next presenter is Ron Stair. Ron is the principal of a third-party administration firm. I've known Ron for a very, very long time. I enjoy Ron because I think he's one of the funniest people I know. Like me, he may not like the term, but the turd in the punch bowl, somebody who's very, very frank and very, very honest. I kind of admire that in him. A lot of people, I'm sure that other people get rubbed the wrong way, but that's the same with me. So without further ado, Ron Stair.
Hey, thanks, Harry. So in the world of people who are missing sports, if you just go outside, you could watch the Blue Jays and the Cardinals fight over Dryerland or something. Anyway, so a lot of the things that I was going to speak about have already been covered, which is fine. But in the last couple of weeks, it's really been a very interesting time for us in that we've had conversations with more than 60 people who are not our clients because their TPA and or their financial advisor have just ignored them. They want to know what's going on. They want some guidance. They want some direction. And we've onboarded a half a dozen new clients in the last 2 weeks as a result of this. My staff working at home are going to be unhappy about that perhaps, or maybe not so much. Oh, Ira, you got control of the slides.
Yeah.
Here. Okay. So one of the things that we're seeing here is we've got all the stuff going on with the CARES Act, but it's right on the heels of the Secure Act. So the Secure Act really created hundreds of moving pieces that were primarily form over substance, haven't been codified yet. We weren't quite sure how we were going to build that into certain things. And now we've got all of this stuff going on with the CARES Act on top of it. So ongoing services in terms of notices, amendments, whether or not you have planned terminations, people terminations, compensation, where does compensation fall into it between people getting unemployment, being furloughed, being terminated, getting family medical leave out compensation, any distributions and loans. And in many cases, we're going to actually document these items after the fact. And in some cases, the plan may not even be in yet because in 2021, under the Secure Act, we could put a brand new plan in 2020, we could put a brand new plan in 2021 for 2020 and build Secure Act stuff into it. So it's going to be very, very interesting to watch. Your TPA really has to be on top of their game. Equally important, your payroll provider has to be on top of the game. You need a robust time and attendance platform. They don't want your bookkeepers scribble notes on a napkin. So these things are very important. You want to coordinate with the financial advisor. You want to work with the attorneys, especially the accountants. The accountants need your help here more than anybody other than maybe HR. HR is completely overwhelmed, understaffed. It's an issue. Next slide, please. So what are the consequences? Ari talked about this earlier on. Is it a furlough? Is it a layoff? Is it a termination? And again, some of this is not going to be really clear, because if somebody goes, let's assume that I was getting ready to fire somebody and they decide I need to go out on family medical leave. Well, family medical leave is a very big deal. They're not terminated. You can't really fire them when they're out on family medical leave. So you have to pay attention to where these people are and how they're getting paid in that space. So that's that. Form over substance. If somebody is fired, you cancel their email account, you cancel their health insurance, you take their keys, all of these obvious things that when people fired. Ari had mentioned the partial termination issues. If they're furloughed and they don't come back, where do they fit into partial termination? Ari, next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So the consequences, if I furlough you, I don't have a distributable event. It's not a partial termination. If I have a plan with elapsed time involved, that clock is still running. Any payments I make to the employee is going to probably be compensation. That includes sick leave. Again, you have to look at different states. We don't have sick leave in our office. We have paid time off, which is an aggregate, but some companies have defined sick leave as well as paid time off. Different states define it differently. Hours of service include your paid time off, whereas if somebody is severed, I have a distributable event. This could trigger a partial termination. Again, it's all facts and circumstances. Availability of loans. Do I want to amend my plan to allow for any of these things? I don't have to do the stuff that's out there that's available to us. I've had a number of clients say, we are not amending the plan for any of this COVID stuff and any of the CARES Act issues. That's their decision. Next slide, please. The partial termination, again, is an issue because primarily people are just going to get vested. And a lot of our plan designs have immediate eligibility. People are in the plan. Normally they wouldn't be vested at all. Clients barfing a little bit saying, I don't want to do this because I was planning on getting that money back. It's still going to be facts and circumstances. The employees may or may not be aware of it, but if you're going to play audit roulette, be aware that's out there. You probably want to fully vest the employees rather than take that chance. But again, not my plan, not my money. Next slide. Hardship distributions. We're seeing a lot of this right now. And our concern, quite frankly, is in the vendors. The cyber liability at the vendors levels is frightening. The amount of attacks they're getting in terms of people requesting hardship, people requesting loans. The weak underbelly of all of these systems are the employees' home computers, because no matter how robust my systems are in my office or any of the vendor systems are, the employee systems may not be secure from a cyber perspective. So we're seeing a lot of these hardship distribution requests coming, and so far we've had 3 in our office that did not come from the employee. It's just something you need to be aware of. It's just another thing that it's a problem. The safe harbor hardships, are they in a FEMA declared disaster area? Well, last week there was 18 states plus Guam and Puerto Rico that have been declared disaster status. However, if you go to the FEMA website, it is really horrific to get through it and try to figure out what other areas have been added. If you don't care, if the participant does not qualify for the CARES Act distribution or hardship, You can go to the safe harbor hardship events to determine whether you have that immediate and heavy need. Really, it again comes down to a document issue. And your deadline for making these distributions is the last day of the plan year. Next, Harry. Coronavirus-related distributions. I'm not sure how anybody doesn't qualify for this. I have coronavirus. My spouse has coronavirus. Somebody in my house has coronavirus. I can't go to work because of the coronavirus. We're shut down. My kids are home from school and I need to be here because the school is shut down. It's going to be very hard for somebody to not be able to demonstrate that they can take a coronavirus-related distribution. What's really fairly interesting to me is they're not available from any type of defined benefit plan. And that becomes interesting. Next, Harry. So we already talked about who is qualified. Again, here's your list from best we could consolidate it. The good news is the plan administrator, which is whoever the business owner is who's putting the plan in, we can rely on the employee certification that he or she satisfies those conditions. So we don't have to get doctor's notes. We don't have to check on a spouse. We don't have to make sure that the kids are really home. We can just take the employee certification to this. Next, Ari. Tax and the plan attributes. Okay, the distributions, if you get the COVID distributions, it's not subject to the 10% distribution penalty. It is, you can take this distribution and pay it back if you would like to over a 3-year period. You can roll it over within a 3-year period. It is only the amount of money that you take out, not adjusted for gains and losses. Next. Normal plan rollover rules. This is not not subject to the 20% withholding. You can have voluntary withholding of 10% if you like. If you're going to do, as the employer, you want to make sure you give the withholding notice out to people. You do not have to allow a direct rollover, and you don't have to do the special tax notice. Now, the participant has the tax benefits whether or not the plan adopts the COVID-19 relief. So what does that mean is basically that if the plan is terminating, it qualifies for no premature distribution penalty, the 3-year spread on the income, and the 3-year rollover period. Next, please. Plan amendment deadline. Now, this is all CARES Act provisions, is the last year of the 2022 plan year. Governmental plans 2024. Terminating, if I'm going to terminate my plan, I have to adopt my care provisions prior to termination, just because it's got to be part of the plan. So here's the cause for confusion. I put a new plan in 2020. My documents don't have to be done until 2021. What can we build into the plan? We haven't thought all of this through yet, but I'm sure there's going to be some interesting planning models here. Next, please. RMDs. So if I have the RMD in 2020, I have to take it or not. If I've already taken it, I've taken it. Can I roll it back in within the 60 days? Perhaps. This is limited to defined contribution plans, and it doesn't apply to 457B plans of tax-exempt organizations. Go ahead, I'm sorry, next slide, please. I may want to take it because I may be in a lower tax bracket. Maybe I want to take that money now, pay a lower tax on it, and Roth it. You know, we've got all kinds of little things that we can do here. So if I want to take this and convert it to a Roth, now may be the time to do it. As the tax filing deadline is extended to July 15th, the deadline for making the 2019 contributions to your IRAs are also extended to July 15th. So we've got some time to plan for this. And you really have to take a look at where people are in their financial life. Next. Participant loans. Next. So I can, basically under CARES, we have an increase in the loan limit for an individual. So you've got the lesser of 100% of your account or $100,000. And this is applicable to loans made between March 27th to September 23rd of 2020. Next. Now, the replay delay, I'm sure we could have a sports analogy in here somewhere. For the qualified individuals, again, don't forget the qualified individuals are the COVID people that fit into that little mosaic that we built before. The CARES Act says that the loan repayments that are due during this period to December 31st of 2020 can be delayed for a year. And the 5-year repayment period is disregarded for the 2020 delayed period. So interest continues to accrue, but the normal 5-year limit could conceivably be 6 years. You may need to revise your programs and your documents. You may have to pay attention to your vendors who are going to automatically generate 1099-Rs. Most of the vendors that we deal with have been up to speed on this, but I don't know. Some may not be. Any subsequent repayments plus applicable interest can be re-amortized over the extended repayment period. And you can allow participant to continue to make payments. Next. What happens if you're not qualified? Well, if you're having trouble repaying, you lost your job, your spouse lost a job, the employer can consider, but doesn't have to, modify the mandatory payroll reduction provision to allow the employee to make payments back from payroll deposits. The participant can then decide whether or not to continue paying the loan. The employer can decide to delay treating the loan as a loan default. After this crisis is over, the employer could use EPCRS to correct the loan failure. There's all kinds of things that can go in here. However, I think intentionally failing and then using EPCRS to correct the loan would be considered a very aggressive approach, even too aggressive for our office. Next. Loan acceleration upon the termination of employment. Many plan loan policies provide for an acceleration of a loan upon termination. So I've got an employee with a 5-year note, they're 2 years into it, they're terminated. They've either got to pay off the loan or it's a distributable event. If the participant is a qualified individual, this loan offset distribution would qualify as a CARES Act distribution. And if not a qualified individual, you can still roll it over to an IRA by the extended due date of the 2020 return. Potentially could use the loan rules to delay acceleration for a qualified individual for up to 1 year. Again, this is where you're going to bring value to your plan sponsors that care about their employees. Next. This is interesting also, making loans to terminated participants. Many plan loan policies limit loans to the parties in interest. So the plan can temporarily modify the loan policy to permit loans to terminated participants. And later you could amend back to the original policy, not subject to the anti-cutback rules. And loans to terminated employees may qualify under the CARES Act provisions. But again, a lot of this we don't know. We don't have a lot of guidance. And it's really going to be a very specific facts and circumstances situation with each employee and employer. Next. Here's where we've been really seriously consulting over the last couple of weeks. Do you blow up your safe harbor? So in 2008, when the market was really, we had similar situations in the market, Treasury came back and gave us relief in the safe harbor world. But currently they haven't addressed this now. So what do you do? Next, please. Treasury has been just been silent on this. I know they've been busy with other things. The American Retirement Association has asked Treasury for guidance in this space. What do we do with our safe harbor plans? Under the existing regulations, there are rules for exiting, suspending, or terminating the safe harbor contributions. And quite frankly, we're telling clients, we don't know. What is clear is if I terminate my safe harbor now, I owe the employees the contribution that we would have given them year to date on their compensation year to date at the end of whatever the notice period is. So if I want to do this effective today, I really can't. I have to give the employees a notice. So I think it's May 15th is the first period that we can actually get a notice in on time for now for the employees. So I'm going to be on the hook for those contributions. Next, please. Can I amend it to eliminate the safe harbor contribution? Yeah, under 412 I can if I have an economic loss. But the plan safe harbor notice really needed to have included this. So sometimes we see safe harbor notices that are very, very poorly done. They don't anticipate this kind of an issue. So in that area, what is your amendment going to say? We do have to prorate the compensation for the employees. You have to make that contribution. If the plan is top heavy, I may not get any real leverage out of getting rid of the safe harbor, because if I have to make the 3% anyway, or I'm going to have to make the 4% anyway, because of the top heavy situation, maybe I just leave the safe harbor alone. As we pointed out to one of our clients the other day, the employee's compensation is only going to be about 70% of what it was last year, because they're not getting paid for 2.5 or 3 months. The business is going to ramp up at a slower pace than anticipated. Perhaps some of the employees aren't going to be there. So the safe harbor contribution may not be as onerous as it was in the past. So these are things, again, that require time and consulting with your client. Next, please. Again, this is an area of the law that I don't particularly like to deal with. This is why I have compliance people. So you have to provide all of these different notices. I cannot imagine the payroll companies getting any of this right. If they do, it's going to be a complete accident. But you do need to give them the safe harbor notices. You need to give them 30-day notices. You need to give them, you need to be aware you're going to be subject to the ADP and ACP test for the entire year. We talked about the top heavy thing. I don't want to belabor that point all that much. Next screen, please. Are you going to terminate this? Again, you can terminate this, but all participants must receive a supplemental notice. This includes your participants that you can't find. They're not there. They got money in the plan, but everybody needs to get a notice. That could be a problem. The employer has to adopt the amendment. It cannot be retroactively effective. It can't be more than 30 days after the participants receive the supplemental notice. The amendment has to specify that the plan will pass the ADP and ACP tests for the entire year using full year testing, and the employer satisfies the safe harbor rules, including the obligation to contribute to safe harbor contributions through the date of the amendment. Next one, please. Again, we touched on this. If I'm terminating for cause, substantial business hardship, merger acquisition, other miscellaneous events under 410B6, I don't have to do ADP, ACP testing, and I do not lose my top heavy exemption. Next. We played with this. I don't think it's going to work. So under the under the Secure Act, I could put in a safe harbor plan after the end of the year. Do I blow up my safe harbor for 2020 and then figure out at the end of the year that I shouldn't have blown it up and I reinstate it using this delayed safe harbor non-elective option? I think that's a little too aggressive also, but it's out there. I'm sure we're going to see people doing it. Next, please. Discretionary match and profit sharing. Well, they're discretionary, so I don't have to do anything with them. Again, this is a document issue. What does the document say? One of our clients insisted on putting in a discretionary match with a minimum floor. It's like, why would you want to do that? But they wanted their employees to see it. However, you really do want to pay attention to the documents that the client has. Sometimes I know what our documents say. Sometimes we inherit a client that's got a document from someplace else. We're looking at that document and trying to figure out how it fits into our ability to administer it within the confines of what's going on. Do you have to do true ups? Do you have to make additional contributions? You just have, and you have to do the same thing with the profit sharing piece as well. Next, please. Don't forget, we have anti-cutback rules under ERISA. Again, I'm getting very redundant with this, but if you have a last day or hours requirement and the employee is not satisfied those conditions, you can amend the plan to eliminate the contribution. If the plan does not have last day 1,000 hours, you have to really pay attention again to when the employee has earned the right to this benefit that you're terminating. You can freeze the fixed contribution for the balance of the year, but you're pretty well stuck with what the employee has earned or accrued to date. Next. Deadlines for the contributions. Now, this is interesting because this is getting pushed all over, because as they keep changing the contribution deadlines, or the tax deadlines, we're not sure where all of these contributions and deduction deadlines are going to fall. Safe harbor is still tied to the 12th month following the last day of the 12th month following the plan year. The safe harbor 401k matching, if it's periodic in the document, it's still the following plan year quarter. Profit sharing and matching is still tied to whatever time frame is going on in these things. So you have to pay attention to what's going on. The deduction is the due date for the tax return. So you may have a tax deduction due date past the time frame of when the money has to be in the plan to satisfy other areas. Again, it's something you need to pay attention to. Next. So now, if I have a deduction and I miss the deduction deadline, it's deductible in the year of the contribution subject to the limits of that year. This is an interesting tax planning tool for people. In some circumstances, you may be sitting there taking a deduction for 19, but I don't need the deduction in 19. So I'm going to take that deduction in 20. I can take 20's deduction in 20. I can double up that deduction, maybe create a loss and carry that loss back into 19. We haven't played with the accounting rules enough yet, but there's some opportunity here for people. It's going to be interesting to see what goes on there. Again, you are going to be limited in any given year to whatever the 415 limits are for that year. So if I'm going to double up in this year, it can't be more than this year's 415 limit. If I miss this deadline, I may have, again, EFGRS is going to become an interesting dynamic here. Because sometimes we may do this stuff on purpose with the anticipation of getting correcting it under EFGRS. Next, please. The DOL regulations are in place. Now, I've always had a hard time with people that can't make their deferrals on time. If I can take your paycheck and I can deduct all of your payroll taxes and your health insurance premiums and get all that stuff to the governments and to the health insurance company, why can't I do it with your 401k plan? The fact that the Labor Department still talks about the 7th business day, understand Labor Department doesn't necessarily like it. This is not intended to be a cash flow loan to the employer. It's the employee's money. And I don't think the Labor Department is going to look kindly at this if anybody starts to complain. Next, please. Okay, interim valuations, extensions, and funding. Next. So we're, unfortunately, at any one time, we have 8 or 10 quadros floating around in the office. Most of them were tied to the last val date. Most documents are tied to the last val date. Well, December's val look a whole lot better than March's vals. So we're going back to the divorced upon spouse, and we're talking to the attorneys and saying, we need to do an interim valuation. Here's what the document says about it. Our documents have interim valuation authority in there. And if the person's already terminated, then it's probably too late to go back and add it for them. But if it's there, it does become a fiduciary decision. I really can't say to the business owner's ex-spouse that everybody else in the plan has to take a financial hit so you can get paid out. We're going to do the interim valuations. You want to have a policy and guide for interim valuations. Sort of example, a mark and change of plus or 20%. Relias had an interesting technical blurb on this. The website is there. And again, we'll send this out to everybody who wants this later. Next, please. April 15th, July 15th is the new April 15th. The sole proprietor return date is extended. The deadlines are extended. The IRA contributions deadline are extended. It does not extend the 5,500 deadline. And it doesn't extend the deadline to distribute 402G excess deferrals. Next. Document extensions. Woohoo! They gave us another whole 3 months to fix 403Bs that have been broken for about 25 years. The DB restatement deadline's extended till July 31st. And we don't know what's going on with the DC Cycle 3. That's going to be interesting with all the patchwork quilt amendments that are going on there. The funding deadlines, 2020 minimum funding. In the DB world, we're sitting with about 240 DBs in our office. Our minimum funding contributions are going out to 2021. We have to increase the contributions by the accrued interest. Quarterly contributions are delayed as well. Does not apply to multi-employer plans. Next. So we started about 7 weeks ago. We had a staff meeting and we talked about all of our defined benefit plans and freezing as many of them as we could. We're creating credit balances in plans that we have the ability to create credit balances. And we've talked to clients about soft freezes, hard freezes, full thaws, partial thaws, and de-risking. But given that the correlation between freezing and underfunded seemed to be pretty high, and when you start to look at the 2020 numbers, it's going to be really interesting. We doubt that we're going to end up with a PPA 0 minimum funding. So we're having these conversations with clients. It's not comfortable, it's time consuming, it's 3 to 4 hours with each client, but it's what you're supposed to do if you're a consultant. And quite frankly, we're picking up clients purely because accountants are calling us and saying, you're the only TPA firm actually calling our clients and talking about this stuff. And they're sending us other people. Next. What not to do. Figure Ari was around, he's a sports guy, he liked Derek Coleman, so we're gonna use Derek Coleman as an example. When you're Derek Coleman, you don't save for retirement because you're the #1 pick in the NBA draft in 1990. When you're the #1 pick in the NBA draft in 1990, you wind up Rookie of the Year in 1991. When you're the NBA Rookie of the Year in 1991, you sign a contract extension and earn $91 million in 16 years. When you earn $91 million in 16 years, you think the good times will last forever. When you think the good times will last forever, you have an enormous posse and invest in things like downtown Detroit real estate. When you have an enormous posse and invest in things like downtown Detroit real estate, you eventually file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And when you file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you spend your retirement winters in Syracuse trudging through 120 inches of snow to attend Syracuse University basketball games and eat dinner with people you hardly know and don't like because they pick up the tab. Don't spend your retirement winters in Syracuse trudging through 120 inches of snow to attend Syracuse University basketball games and eat dinner with people you hardly know and don't like because they pick up the tab. Save more for retirement and manage your plan properly. Okay, next. Final thoughts. It's too soon to know what the impact of today's events will be and how long our lives and life will be impacted. But the other day, as I was explaining to a reporter the relief measures we have pressed and others we are still pressing for, I couldn't help but be struck by the irony of trying to make it easier for workers to draw down their retirement savings early and of looking for ways to provide employers breathing room when it comes to making those essential matching contributions, when nearly every day of my professional life has been spent encouraging folks to do just the opposite, to pour more money in and to delay taking it out of their retirement savings. This may not be the reasons that these monies were set aside, but there is not much point in saving for retirement if you can't get to retirement. Next. So, as with many of you, we have just marked our third week of being out of the office. As sacrifices go, working from home, staying inside, avoiding contact, and washing hands for what seems a ridiculous number of times a day seems a pretty modest contribution to the effort. I can say that this is pretty much the first time in my life I have put more alcohol on my hands instead of in my mouth, but I digress. Our real contribution, like yours, is focusing on minimizing the impact of what the second wave, not of illnesses, but of the financial consequences of that illness. This has meant advocating on behalf of easing access to those funds by participants while incorporating common sense guardrails that consider the unique operational aspects of these times. It has meant continuing to press forward on rational updates to long-term reforms like electronic disclosure, notarization. What it's meant that we are looking ahead and looking to stave off future damage from extreme responses such as planned termination. There will come a time, of course, for assessing the damage of COVID-19, both in terms of human time and capital, and it is undoubtable that the associated market volatility will take a toll both physically and emotional for years to come. And as we sat here today, it is worth noting that our private retirement system is not just how America saves, it's going to make a difference in how America lives. Thank you. Next, please. Anybody want to talk about any of this stuff? This is my contact information. I'm also available for children's parties.
Great. We got some questions for you. Two questions dealing with the IRS, the 5,500. You're referencing the extension. That's for the 2019 5,500, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So the extension going from to 7/15. Well, I mean the extension date that we talked about was dealing with the regarding 5,500 due dates. The 5,500 that were due on April 15th for a June 30th, 2019 year ends were extended to July 15th, right?
Correct.
Your comment about no 5,500 extend due dates were referring to 12/31 year end. They didn't announce extension yet for that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Your comment about no 5,500 extend date was referring to a calendar year plan. Calendar year plan. Yeah. Okay. It's an easy question. If a spouse of a participant loses the job, I don't think that qualifies the participant to qualified for the COVID distribution, correct?
You know, I believe that it does, because it's a reduction in household income. So I do believe that that does count.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but that's my reading of it.
Well, you're reading a liberal interpretation. I take a Scalia approach to things.
Okay.
My understanding in that in order to qualify for COVID distributions or COVID loans, the participant must, one, have the virus or have a spouse or dependent that has the virus, or participant financially impact due to COVID, reduced wages. I get a lot of those questions. They don't, you have a reduction in work hours, you're home or whatever it is, you're going to qualify, like you said at the beginning.
Yeah, I think that if the virus affected your income and your household's income, I believe that you qualify. I don't see how it, I don't know, maybe it's a very liberal, short-sighted reading of it, but that's how I look at it.
Scott wants to know what age for children's parties.
It depends on the children, because if they're under 2, they're just really annoying.
Great. Last question. Are employers choosing not to amend even though they know or are told you don't have to do it before the distribution, or is there a deferred period to make the amendments?
I think, the few employers I've spoken to currently, so far about this, they've chosen not to amend because they want to see how things play out. They want to see what other relief we may get. And quite frankly, they just don't want to pay us right now.
Yeah, well, I get that. Again, there's a MEP that I'm involved with, and there's that one adopting employer that doesn't want to offer it. And I said, you know what? Let it. It's going to drive the provider crazy. But I'm like, you know what? I don't want to tell them they can't do it. It's just if they don't want to offer it, they don't want to offer it. So
one of the interesting things that we have been looking at is clients are coming to us and saying on their defined benefit side that they don't have the money to pay for it. But if we look at the situation where in this particular case, this client was able to get his PPP money. He may not bring all his employees back, but if he contributes to the retirement plan, he's going to fill his bucket that way because that's part of the dollars that are being used. When you're backfilling the PPP, you get to, it's all the salaries and the cost of benefits.
that's right. Okay, thank you, Ron. Like I said, last but not least, it's going to be Brian Auerbach. Brian, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Let me get you ready. Brian is with Paycor. And obviously these days, payroll is going to be on a lot of people's minds. So let me get the.
Yeah, and I also have, thanks. I also have Brianna Wiggins, one of my teammates, on the call with me since I was the last second replacement. So she's just here to make sure I cover everything. And when Ari pulls up the slide deck, this slide was originally meant to be for pre-COVID stuff. So I'm going to try to COVID-19 it as much as humanly possible to kind of bring in the real impact of why data is important to the organization. I think now more than ever, as Ron just mentioned, having information to do things with it is very important. The gentleman before that, we were talking about auto rollovers and reducing risk. So, I mean, compliance, automation are big conversations. And let's use the data that we have at hand to try to work those conversations. Little things like it could be having a 360 integration with payroll and the 401k system, right? Are those very important. So if people need loans, it's going back and forth. The information, it's not something that people have to manually touch. One of the things I talk about a lot is when you add humans into things, things are going to go wrong. So as much as we can keep this automated, it makes a lot of people's lives easier. It'll make Ron's life a lot easier. And then you don't have people like Ron yelling at the payroll companies. So Ari, if you can go on to the next slide, please. So part of this is, are you losing faith in your HR team's ability to solve problems with data? Any of your clients that may have had cuts, how are you guys choosing your cuts? How are you guys choosing what you're doing with those clients? Whether it be, let's stop the 401k match, let's lay people off, let's stop car allowances, let's stop commissions, whatever it is, how are you making those decisions? Are they data driven? And that's a big piece of what we want to talk about today. And I'll try to make this towards the end as much open form as humanly possible. You can see the stats below that. This is back in 2015. This is a New York Times study that 20% of business leaders didn't trust their HR teams with the data. Or I'm sorry, 20% did, so 80% did not trust them. So it goes that whole 80-20 rule back and forth. So, in 2018, we decreased to 11%. So the trend isn't going upwards, it's going downwards. So how can we make the HR focus easier for the financial side of it? Next slide, please. So the difference is, and there's things like high performing teams, I can mention Creative Plan Design. Ron, who just was on, is a valued client of Paycor's. And this is a team, if you really haven't talked to Ron, data drives mostly everything he does in life. And I think that's why his organization is rated one of the best organizations to work for. And they make really smart decisions, both for their clients and internally for their employees and the organization as a whole. So being able to use data from the HR team, the data you have at hand, like we talked about time and attendance before, making sure that information is unified throughout the process and making sure we're using it in ways that is going to better you and the organization. And also, we very big thing right now with COVID is talking about, what are we going to defer? How long are people working, et cetera? And as you may have people working from home, if they're working more than their 40-hour work week, are they getting overtime, and are we matching properly if we're still matching contributions? Because if we got a PPP and they are working that overtime, is that eligible or not? I'm not going to leave that, I'm not a tax professional, so I'm not going to answer that question. But those are very important things to keep looking at in this light environment. So next slide, please. So before COVID, a couple things that every company was really looking at was recruiting, labor cost, and turnover. So recruiting is the better people we can bring in, the better we're going to have as an organization. Labor cost always important. Again, we talk about overtime, benefits costs, et cetera. Then turnover is going to cost us on average 250% of someone's salary to replace them. So before COVID-19, there was a lot of conversation about the war on talent with a very high unemployment rate. In the last 2 months, we basically wiped out any gains that we've had by keeping our unemployment rate low for the last 10 years. So the war on talent is really over, but now can be an opportunistic time for your organization to reach out and find people. As advisors, are your companies, what are they doing right now? And, it sounds kind of a little bit too optimistic, but if you have companies that are in good, stable position and we're looking to grow or grow after this, now is a perfect time to go find those right people, whether it be salespeople, engineers, whatever it may be. We've seen, everyone talks about our healthcare professionals that are working. Well, a lot of healthcare professionals aren't. If they weren't, emergency room personnel, they may not be working right now. So it's an awesome time for, if you have surgical groups, to start looking for the people that they may have, because they probably were furloughed. And, once people get furloughed, I think the loyalty to go back to that organization, even if they were 100% happy before, is kind of going to go down now. The labor cost piece I'll talk about in a little bit. And then, turnover right now is making sure that, I think now it's more of an employer choice of who's turning over than an employee choice. And depending on the organizations that you work with, making sure that we're turning over the right people, and, especially with PPP, that we're keeping the right people. One of the things with the PPP loan is that by June 30th, we have to be back to our full-time equivalent headcount. I think that's going to be pushed out depending on how long we are staying, the self-distancing and quarantining. But right now, it doesn't have to be the same people we're bringing back. But again, you'll have to retrain people if it's not the same people, et cetera. So picking those folks that we are going to furlough and that we are keeping on, why it's a very difficult conversation, I think is the conversation that has to be had. So Ari, if you move to the next slide. So in the past, we've measured recruiting metrics, and I'll go through this very quickly, is time to fill, the referral rate, and cost per hire. I can tell you I've been with Paycor for 4 years now. Before coming here as a financial advisor, I owned 6 Allstate agencies down in Atlanta, and Paycor was my payroll provider. So that's how I was actually referred here by a good friend of mine who actually was my sales rep. So my cost per hire was very low. My onboarding took about 2 weeks and was very simple. But other people, depending on how complicated it can get, can be a very long onboarding process and very costly for paying for recruiters, et cetera. Using powers like LinkedIn, et cetera, and helping your clients see those ways that they can bring people on. And also the benefits that you're providing now as 401k advisors, those benefits that you're adding to that organization, helping your organization realize the leverage, because right now many organizations are not doing that, or they've gotten rid of 401k plans, at least the match, if not the whole, as we talked about, a lot more of it. So it's a very important piece to talk about. And next slide, please. Thanks. So, right now, labor cost is kind of a really important thing. Obviously, as we want to make sure that the PPP is used for the proper usage. Absenteeism rate is extraordinarily high right now. The FBI sent out a warning, I believe it was on Wednesday, to warn organizations about people fraudulently going for absentee time and also fraudulently taking EFMLA and EPSLA. So those are significant things that we need to worry about, unfortunately, in this time in the economy, and the financial impact of those absences. I'll give you a quick example. My wife is a family court attorney here in New York. Unfortunately, some of the other attorneys have taken advantage to not show up for courtroom trials. And unfortunately, that has come to making my wife go into a court and work a lot often and be exposed potentially a lot more than she normally would. So these are labor costs, and also comes into the retention of the employees. So, you know, obviously if you have people that are taking time off, they're getting their pay normally as they would potentially, and even if they're claiming EFMLA. But then the people that are working, we're paying overtime for that. So working with our organizations to help their financial team realize that, and incentivizing some people that are finding creative ways to get people to work, depending on whether they're essential or non-essential, is huge. And obviously now the actual budget that we've had versus actual compensation, that's been basically someone just threw a piece of TNT in that and blew that all up. But making sure that we're sticking to the new budget really becomes PPP for most of these organizations. So making sure we're sticking to that, and also allowing these companies to survive in the meantime is extremely important. So Ari, if you just move on to the next slide, please. So obviously number 9 here, the voluntary turnover rate that has become something probably involuntary more than anything else at this point. But how do we help the organizations that we're working with through this? A lot of it is the data back and forth and engaging our employees. So that is a big piece right now, letting people know what's going on in an organization. Just as Governor Cuomo and President Trump are on TV every day, Paycor has meetings every day, and it's just a best practice that we have 5-minute, 10-minute coffee sessions. Our CEO gets on, our director of HR is on, and we just kind of get an update of where the company is and where everything is. Using things like, we also heat map within our HR system, showing where the outbreaks are showing, not through our company, but through the country. So we can see where the risks are. Obviously we're all in quarantine, but it helps us to kind of also focus on where our sales may be, and also where we may have turnover metrics. So using the data is a huge aspect for all these pieces for us. So seeing the trends that are there. So if I can see if I can see trends in people not showing up to work, a big one that we've seen in New York is the amount of NYPD members that haven't been going to work. It's like 20% of their workforce, where normally it's 2 to 3%. So seeing trends like that, now that we have that data, how are we able to affect that data to turn that? I mean, we've talked about turning curves a lot in the last couple of weeks, but how do we flatten that curve or turn it the other way that we want it to go? Ari, next slide, please. So a big piece about Paycor, and this is the only piece I'll talk really about Paycor itself, is we want to help answer questions by information, right? I want to give you the information as a business owner, as an advisor, that you can then turn to and help your clients with, and the clients can look inside the organization, make the business decisions they need to make. The data integrity is important. We're not bringing in third-party solutions to do this. It's all information that's owned by that company, by that client. And then, you know, what impact is that going to have on the organization to do that? So if I can, you know, tell who I need to keep with my team and who's replaceable, those are big pieces. And right now, that's a conversation that, you know, before was really a conversation about retaining top talent. Now the conversation really is retaining that top talent, but also where am I able to lose some folks? So, and how does that put me at a competitive advantage coming out of all this? And I just wanted to turn it over. By the way, my contact information is at the bottom, but I just want to turn it over to my colleague Brianna to see if I missed anything.
No, Brian, you actually did a great job of covering everything. I don't think I could add anything.
Awesome. And the only thing I do want to add is just no matter what payroll system your clients are with, just make sure that right now they are recording everything for the CARES Act and FFCRA, the Families First Corona Response Act. You want to make sure EFMLA, EPSLA, if they're not taking the PPP, that if they're trying to get tax credits or deferring tax credits, that's properly being accounted for now. Otherwise, it's going to become a forensic accounting nightmare in 6 months to a year when we have to go through with this. And when all the data is properly in there, if they are getting PPP loans and the information is in their payroll system, it'll be very easy for them to go back to the government to change the PPP loan to a grant status and have it forgiven. And also be able to show that 75% is coming from payroll related expenses, whether it be cost of salaries, benefits, retirement plans, et cetera. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ari, and if there's any questions.
Yeah, I don't know if you answered it, but which companies do you offer payroll integration with? Which plan providers? Because, you know, ADP
Okay, so
is the biggest thing on their 401k.
Yeah, so we obviously do not integrate with ADP or Paychex. We do have online reporting, so we give you the information for that. But it's John Hancock, Empower, Voya, Ascensus, Principal, Emeritus, One America, Brianna, I know I'm missing a couple here, but Transamerica. So pretty much most of the major players that we have 360 integration with. And the rest of them, if I didn't mention, there is usually a 180 integration, which means the payroll information is flowing to the 401k provider, but they are not sending information back to us.
Okay, that's it. That's all the questions that we got.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Hold on, So as they say, where I come from, that's a wrap. But of course, I got a lot of positive feedback with people's comments and emails and all that stuff. We are going to do this again next week for the Plan Sponsor Forum. If you want to be part of it, you know, you have a 401k plan, you want to, actually, we do have a question. Okay, just another comment about how people have a great time with this. So we have a Plan Sponsor Forum next week. Feel free to attend if you want. If you want to sponsor it, speak in front of, right now, it's about 30 plan sponsors. Contact me. Of course, I'm always a little bit, I wouldn't say aggressive, but ahead of myself. And while the presentation was going on and I got so many different comments about people want to do this again and how much they enjoy this rather than going to a conference. Again, I like going to the stadiums and, you know, meeting Goose Gossage a few weeks back was a lot of fun again. But we're going to do it again. We're going to do it on May the 5th, which I think is in 3 weeks. Here is the logo. We're going to do a new logo so people know that they're going to go to a second different conference. If you're interested, again, in being part of that, we'll have probably information within this weekend on how to sign up for that. So I appreciate everybody. The amount of interest in people signing up and attending was fantastic. And want to thank again to all the plan sponsors, the plan providers who sponsor this and provided content. And again, everybody had a great time. And like I said, we'll do this again in another couple weeks. So thank you so much. Take care.